Chapter 242. Nian Bing strode over to the dragon god. Because he had used his spiritual power to instantly kill a divine expert, and because he had continuously used his most powerful heavenly eye domain, his body was extremely weak. Thus, he could only walk, and was unable to teleport to the dragon god's side. Looking at the tall and majestic elder in front of him, Nian Bing wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. He had not been in contact with the dragon god for a long time, but his life could be said to have been saved by the dragon god. At that time, if the dragon god had not brought him to the continent of gods, he would have been recorded as a zombie. How could he have achieved what he had today? The dragon god looked at Nian Bing and said, "Child, you are very brave. You and your companions bravely met the challenge in the face of such a powerful army of gods on the continent of gods. When I first saw you, I had a premonition that you would become one of the greatest figures in human history. At that time, you used your own life to erupt with powerful magic to save my children. Since then, you have had a close relationship with us dragons. After that, I brought you to the continent of gods. Your continuous growth surprised me. Now, you have truly grown into a hero of the human race. However, there is one thing I must remind you. When facing those gods, you must be very, very careful." Nian Bing nodded firmly and said, "Lord Dragon God, your sacrifice will not be in vain. You have bought us precious time. I will definitely lead the brave warriors of the Yangon continent to keep those abominable bastards out of the Yangon continent forever." The dragon god looked deeply at Nian Bing and said, "If you want to achieve the final victory in this war, you must pay attention to a key point. Do you know what it is?" Nian Bing thought for a moment and said, "Is it the king gods?" Of course he knew. The strength of the sovereigns was also a decisive factor in this war. The dragon god reluctantly shook his huge head. "No, not the king gods, but that king god. He is the king of the king gods who fought with me before, Shi Jia. Although the other kings are powerful, you still have the power to fight back. However, Shi Jia is different. Frankly speaking, he has already surpassed the realm of the king gods. This was not only because he had 6 acupoints of the ultimate realm. At the same time, it was also because he had opened all 3 of his extreme emperor acupoints. I once told you that the Huangji acupoint is not the only one. This was also the reason why he could be compared to the heavenly eye acupoint. The 3 extreme emperor acupoints and the other 5 ultimate acupoints allowed him to reach level 15. Otherwise, how could he have withstood so many of your magician's attacks and killed me with his own strength? His strength was simply too strong. If you can't think of a way to destroy him, it's useless even if you kill all the other gods. You must understand that just his strength alone is enough to completely destroy all of you. The numbers were right in front of him. It's impossible to have any advantage at all. 15th level? Hearing this number, Nian Bing's heartbeat suddenly sped up. When she recalled the golden light that Shi Jia had emitted previously and his domineering aura, Nian Bing could not help but become even more curious. Then how should we deal with him? He has 3 extreme emperor acupoints. Is he someone we can fight against? The dragon god said, "I don't know. I can't answer this question. Apart from those true gods, I really can't think of any other way to destroy him. However, I can remind you that sometimes the strongest point can also be the weakest point. In today's battle, although he played a huge role and even killed me, he has also injured himself. With his personality, he will not be able to fully recover. Before it fully recovers, it will not launch an all-out attack. However, it will not take more than 10 days. How you prepare will depend on yourselves. Miracles often only appear in front of those who are prepared. I believe that you have the courage and determination to do this. Nian Bing, you will always be the friend of us dragons." His voice was filled with gratification. Having existed for tens of thousands of years, he had long been prepared to face death. He reluctantly looked at Garamandes, Kagiosis, and his clansmen. The dragon god's head drooped, and he left with a smile. The death of the dragon god was like a huge rock that pressed down on the hearts of all the dragons. At the same time, it also brought some haze to this war. The dragon god had sacrificed his life to give the warriors of the Yangon continent a chance to recuperate. His death was completely worth it. Nian Bing was very clear about this. If the dragon god had not disregarded his own safety and used all his strength to severely injure Shi Jie, the war would have ended today. Just as the dragon god had said, although Shi Jie was only one person, he had the ability to destroy everything. The dragon god's physical body went through a simple ceremony according to the dragon's customs. His physical body was cremated, leaving behind the dragon soul and dragon pearl to be inherited by his son, the fire dragon king, Garamandes. As for his dragon armor and dragon bones, which had been manipulated, they were kept by the new dragon god, Kagios. Once the dragons found a place to store their principal and interest, these dragon bones and dragon armor would be kept in the dragon necropolis. A sorrowful atmosphere shrouded the entire human alliance army. They only understood the importance of this war after witnessing the true strength of the gods. The temporary meeting tent was still being held by the representatives of the four empires. However, one of the representatives had changed. Rong Yu's eyes were filled with worry. He sighed softly and said, "We made such ample preparations, but we didn't expect our losses to be so great. It seems that we still underestimated the strength of these gods." Luo Ro lowered her head and said, "The mistake this time is mine. I underestimated the enemy, which led to this situation." Nian Bing tried her best to conceal the sadness brought about by the passing of the dragon god. She patted Luo Ro's hand and said, "No, how can this be your fault? You didn't do anything wrong. Your plan was already perfect. It's just that the enemy's strength was too strong. You don't have to blame yourself. If it wasn't for your calm command in the face of danger, I'm afraid our losses would have been even greater. Uncle, how's grandfather's condition now?" Rong Yu sighed and said, "You should know that the Flaming Sun's Knights and the Order of the Fire Dragon were your grandfather's life's work. This time, the two knight orders were completely destroyed. The blow to the old man was too great. In addition, he suffered too much magic backlash in order to command the magicians. His body suffered a lot of injuries. Although he has already been treated, the old man is after all old. I'm afraid he won't be able to contribute in this war." After hearing Rong Zhao's words, Nian Bing felt a little relieved that Rong Qinwu's life wasn't in danger. However, he knew that this battle would become even more difficult. She took a deep breath to calm herself down and said, "Now is not the time to be sad, Ro. We need to carefully plan our next move. Although the first wave of attacks from the gods was repelled by us, it doesn't mean that we have the opportunity to occupy them." The dragon god's words before his death left a deep impression on me. If we want to truly defeat these gods, we have to kill the 5 main gods. Otherwise, as long as they are still alive, a disaster will happen to the Yangon continent. Let's first discuss the strength of both sides. Have we received a report on our losses? Luo Ro shook her head and said, "It should be soon. This time, our losses are too great. It will take some time to count them. We should be able to get a report soon. How are the powerhouses on your side?" Nian Bing said, "The losses on our side can be said to be very small, but it can also be said to be very great. On our side, there are only a few people who can reach the 14th step. In the battle with the main gods and divine experts, although everyone suffered different degrees of injuries, they still have the strength to fight. Only the Fire Dragon King, Big Brother Garamandes, is not in a good condition. His injuries are more serious, and because of excessive grief, his injuries have worsened. Although he has been treated by me. However, the dragon race's body's magic resistance is too strong. If the god's next attack is 10 days later, I'm afraid he won't be able to participate. The great loss I'm talking about is Lord Dragon God. He's definitely a 14th step expert, and he's practically the strongest on our side. His death has greatly reduced the strength of our powerhouses. However, with the addition of the dozens of dragons from the Dragon Clan, our overall strength didn't decrease too much. At least this time, we have the strength to confront those demigod gods head-on. Now, they are all recuperating from their injuries. Luo Ro nodded. I'm also very sad about the death of the dragon god. However, I have to say that his death was very valuable. The dragon god was an elder full of wisdom. In that situation, he managed to delay the enemy's strongest powerhouse in time, and heavily injured him. That was why we were able to kill so many gods and weaken their strength. Now, there are two things we have to do. First, we have to prevent the enemy from launching a sneak attack. I'm afraid that the gods do not have any supplies. On this barren continent, they might not be able to hold on for 10 days before launching their attack. Second, we have to redeploy and be ready for their second attack. Nianbing, do you still remember your worries? We still have to prepare. If they bypass us and head straight for the Yangon continent, then we have to redeploy. Nianbing nodded and said, It's necessary to prevent a sneak attack, but I don't agree with the second point you mentioned. If not for today's battle, I would have such worries. However, through today's battle, I know that as long as the Overgod of She-World is still around, the gods will not give up on a frontal attack. Today we caused them great losses mainly because we ambushed them in advance. Moreover, with the sudden appearance of the dragons, we were able to deal a blow to their students. However, I'm afraid that it won't be so easy next time. As long as the Overgods and the God-ranked experts are not separated from the gods, I'm afraid that it will be difficult for us to gain an advantage with the Overgod of She-World leading them. Therefore, I'm sure that they will still launch a frontal attack. Only by defeating us will they be able to obtain the supplies they need in the shortest time possible. Rongyu nodded and said, That's right. Nianbing's words make sense. I also saw the situation at that time. The super magic that was launched by Father has always been the strongest attack of our Rong family. Your father, 2 uncles, and I all participated in it. The super magic that was launched by so many of us fire mages was actually stopped by the enemy alone. It's really terrifying. Frankly speaking, I don't have any confidence in this battle. However, we don't have the chance to retreat now. We can only have a chance if we fight to the death. Of course, they couldn't retreat now. Although there were many cavalrymen among the human warriors, how could horses outrun those powerful gods? Once they retreated, they would definitely be killed by the gods. Therefore, they had no way out now. Fortunately, the warriors from the Rangoon mainland had an endless supply of supplies at the rear. Through the spatial transmission created by Nianbing, they could replenish their supplies at any time. Just like what Luo Ro had said previously, if they could continue to deplete their supplies, it would undoubtedly be very advantageous for the Rangoon mainland. Mu Jing, who had been silent all this while, suddenly said, Then how should we deploy now? Since those gods have already fought with us, I'm afraid that any ambush will be useless when they come again. We can only face them head-on. However, I'm afraid that it will be very difficult for us to block their frontal attack. Just as Nianbing was about to speak, a few people walked in from outside. Among them were Nianbing's father, Rong Tian, as well as the subordinates of Luo Ro and Mu Jing. There was also Marshal Snow Soul, Grand Prize, and Blood Lion Sex Ice Friend Hall Master Yin Zui. The 5 people who came in came to the 5 of them and whispered a few words to each other. Then they quietly left. Rong Tian glanced at Nianbing and gave his son an encouraging look. Judging from his father's pale face, it was obvious that he had suffered some damage from the new wave's attack. The 5 people who came in all had the same purpose, and that was to report the losses of the headquarters. Everyone's expression became serious, especially Rongyu. His handsome face was slightly distorted, and his eyes revealed a painful expression. Luo Ro said, I'll go first. In this battle, our country has lost about 6,000 warriors, and 3,000 are injured. Most of them are seriously injured, and it will be very difficult for us to have the strength to fight again. The magic crystal bubble army that I designed has been completely annihilated, and all 120 magicians have died." When she thought of her magic crystal cannon, Luo Ro's heart couldn't help but ache. That was a super weapon that had cost the Ottoman Empire's national strength. This time, it had been completely destroyed after only one shot. How could she not feel heartache? Mu Lejing said expressionlessly, "Comparatively speaking, our country's losses are slightly less. 4,000 warriors have died, and about 70 magicians have died from the backlash of Do Qi and the scattered attacks of the gods. About 3,000 warriors have been injured, and most of them are seriously injured and can no longer fight." Shuepa said, "The Ice Moon Empire has lost about 7,000 warriors, and the rest are about the same as the Ottoman Empire. However, the magicians of our country's Ice God Tower have not lost their battle prowess other than expending more magic power. This might be the only good news." When Shi Jie had destroyed the Ice Lotus, he had used up too much of his energy to destroy the flaming giant dragon, causing his strength to weaken slightly. Moreover, he had to immediately retreat to deal with the dragon god, so he had reserved some of his strength. He only destroyed the magic, and did not cause too much of a backlash to the magicians of the Ice God Tower. With the strength of those ice magicians, they were able to completely resist it. Everyone's gaze fell on Rongyu. Rongyu smiled bitterly and said, "Our country's losses are too great. In this battle, all of our elite warriors have perished. The 2 knight regiments have more than 10,000 people, including their mounts, and about 3,000 ordinary warriors have died. Thousands of fire magicians have suffered different degrees of damage, causing the strength of the troops we brought here to be reduced by at least 2/3. I have no idea when the magicians will be able to fight again. This is the biggest problem for me now. Even my father, Prince Rong, has been seriously injured. He definitely can't fight anymore." Everyone was silent. The battle had only lasted less than 2 hours. The allied army of the Yangon continent had lost more than 30,000 elite warriors, including super powerhouses like the Dragon God. At this time, Nian Bing was also in a bad mood. Yin Tu had just reported the losses of the Blood Lion cult to him. The Blood Lion cult's losses were severe, far beyond Nian Bing's imagination. 500 blood guards, only 200 were left. As for the other elite warriors, 500 were dead. The Blood Lion cult's warriors had one thing in common: they were only dead and not injured. During the battle, they had given their all, even if it was their last bit of strength, to destroy the enemy. 2,000 elite. What did these 2,000 elites represent? If they were to be divided according to rank, Nian Bing's losses would not be any worse than the Huarong Empire's. Just those 500 blood guards alone had taken the Blood Lion cult a lot of effort to cultivate. In this battle, 300 of them had disappeared. Of the 2,000 elites, only 1,200 were left. Their strength had been reduced by at least half. Nian Bing did not dare to imagine such a loss in the past. At the same time, Yin Tu also told him. Now, there were less than 100 god-killing crossbows that were still controlled by people. He had discussed with the 7 elders of the cult and was now mobilizing the remaining powerhouses to train. They were striving to master the firing method and coordination of the god-killing crossbows in a short time. Only these super-powerful crossbows could cause more damage to the deities. The silence continued. Everyone did not know what to say at this time. Such a heavy loss. This was something they could not have imagined before the battle. Regardless of the timing, location, and manpower, they had the absolute advantage. They had accurately grasped the time of the enemy's arrival, but even so, the result was still like this in the end. It could be seen how powerful the deities were. After a long time, Nian Bing was the first to break the silence. He said, "Although our losses are great, the enemy's losses are not small either. Under our planned attack, their losses are more than ours. After all, the deities are all powerhouses. We should be proud to be able to kill so many of them. Indeed, the head-on attack from the allied forces of the Yangon mainland had caused the deities to suffer a huge loss. Although the casualties were only divine servants and demigods, their numbers had been greatly reduced. Close to 6,000 deities left their corpses on the ground. At the same time, under Nian Bing's attack, 4 of the deities had died. One of them had lost his ability as a deity due to his arms being destroyed. In terms of the total number of deities, only 2/5 of the original deities were left. Their overall strength had been reduced by a little. Everyone's expression relaxed a little. Of course, they knew that it was already very good to achieve such a result. However, as long as they thought of the tyrannical strength of the She world, they could not feel happy. The enemy still had 5 overgods. The next attack would not be so simple. Although the enemy had lost quite a few people, the loss of the core strength was not too serious. At the very least, the enemy had only lost a few deities. Even the demigod-level deities had suffered very little damage. Luo Ro said, "Now we should start to recalculate the strength of both sides. We need to adjust in time. Nian Bing, split the experts on your side into 2 groups for the time being. The group with lighter injuries will be responsible for preparing for battle at any time. Those with heavier injuries should rest and try to recover as soon as possible. The 2 groups will rotate and be ready to deal with the enemy's sneak attack at any time. On my side, the army also needs to be redeployed. Now, we can't concentrate our troops in one place. Otherwise, once the overgods attack with all their strength, the more concentrated our formation is, the more damage we will suffer. Now we still have about 130,000 soldiers with full combat strength. As long as we cooperate well, we may still have a chance. Moreover, the enemy can sneak attack us. Can't we find an opportunity to sneak attack them? Now I have an idea that I would like to discuss with all of you." Nian Bing nodded and said, "Go ahead." Although the human side had suffered great losses in the first battle, Luo Ro's on-the-spot commanding performance was praised by everyone. No one could replace her position as the military advisor. Luo Ro smiled and said, "I want to send some food and water to the deities." "What? Are you crazy? Have you forgotten our original plan?" Nian Bing cried out in alarm. Rong Yu, Mu Jing, and Shuepo, who represented the other 3 empires, frowned. Feeding the deities until they were full? Were they going to attack them? They now suspected that Luo Ro's brain was in a mess due to the huge shock. Luo Ro smiled indifferently and said, "Of course, I have my reasons for doing this. First of all, the deities probably don't have any supplies now. This is why they have to fight with all their strength. Only then can they continue to live." From Nian Bing's description of the continent of gods, the reason why these gods are so powerful is because they have adapted to the environment of the godly continent. They have gradually formed in order to survive, and this makes them extremely attached to their lives. Therefore, in order to survive, they will bring us great losses if they fight with all their strength. Furthermore, their attacks will also take a long time to complete. This makes it impossible for us to react much. Even if we can block their second attack, it will be a huge loss to us. Our losses will also be great. However, what if they have supplies? The situation will be completely different. The main gods and deities can completely heal their injuries before attacking. That way they will have more confidence. Once the battle starts, because they have supplies at the back, they will think that they still have a way out. They won't fight with all their might. Morale has a huge impact on combat strength. I'm sure you all understand this point. That's why I have this suggestion. As for whether it will be implemented or not, it will be up to us to discuss. After listening to Luo Ro's explanation, everyone calmed down. What she said made sense. Nian Bing thought for a moment. She said, "According to what you said, not only do we have to give them food and water, but we also have to give them food and water. Also, we can't let them know that this food and water is deliberately given to them, right? Luo Ro smiled and nodded. Yes, that's what I mean. Actually, this isn't a very difficult thing to do. I think that they, who have always worked hard to survive, will be very easy to use in this aspect. You don't have to rush to ask me what to do. First, we need to discuss whether this suggestion will be accepted. Rong Yu nodded first and said, Prime Minister's explanation has enlightened me. I am also a commander of an army. Indeed, when there is no supply, the soldiers will easily give their all to survive. If they give it their all, there is hope. If they don't give it their all, they will die. Under such circumstances, the soldiers will often unleash their greatest potential. Therefore, I think this plan is feasible. Mu Jing smiled and said, Of course I agree with Sister's suggestion. However, can we put some poison in the food and water? Once they eat and drink, then. Luo Ro didn't wait for Mu Jing to finish and immediately shook her head. That's impossible. With the strength of the gods, not to mention ordinary poisons, even if they have a lethal poison, I'm afraid they won't eat it so easily. How can people who have struggled for so many years not be careful when it comes to food and water? Therefore, we can't use this method. Moreover, the method I chose to give them food and water, if we put poison in it, I'm afraid we will be equally unlucky. Hearing Luo Ro's words, Nian Bing immediately understood what she wanted to do. She nodded and said, All right, that's all we can do. I hope your psychological warfare will be effective. We need to act quickly in the next few days. Since Nian Bing had agreed, Marshal Shuepa naturally had no objections and passed the decision unanimously. After that, it was time to discuss military arrangements and tactics. Nian Bing didn't participate in the discussion. In terms of military affairs, he was far inferior to the people present. Moreover, he had his own matters to attend to. After coming out of the tent, Nian Bing went directly to a small tent not far away. He stopped in front of the tent and said, I am Nian Bing. May I come in? A low voice sounded from the tent, It's you. Come in. Nian Bing lifted the tent flap and quietly walked in. There were two people in the tent. One was sitting on the ground at the side, looking at Nian Bing. The other was cultivating. A faint green light flashed in front of her and gathered in her body. The two people in the tent were Feng Yu and Ping Chao. In the previous battle, although Feng Yu's undead magic had shocked both sides, it had greatly reduced the casualties of the Rangoon continent's allied forces. Otherwise, the number of casualties wouldn't have been as simple as 30,000. The final damage to the gods wouldn't have been so great. Ping Chao said in a low voice, Feng Yu is fine. It's just that her magic power and spiritual force have been greatly exhausted. You also know that necromancy magic is a heaven-defying ability. She controlled so many undead at once. Although they had just died not long ago and their souls had yet to dissipate, for her body, the consumption was too great. I'm afraid it will take a long time for her to recover. Don't worry, with me here to protect her, she will be fine. In fact, Feng Yu herself didn't want to use this kind of magic, but you saw it in today's battle. If she didn't use undead magic at that time, I'm afraid our losses would have been greater. Nian Bing smiled and said, I don't have a dislike for undead magic. No matter what kind of ability it is, as long as it is used in the right place, then its effect will be good. Although undead magic is full of evil aura, Feng Yu has a pair of clear eyes. So, I have always believed in her. You have worked hard during this time. Is there any problem with the current situation of those survivors? After listening to Nian Bing's words, Ping Chao's face became a lot better. He showed a rare smile and said, Those survivors said that their current life is like heaven. After all, they no longer have to worry about food. Although these survivors have no memory of civilization, their ability to accept new things is very strong. In just a few days, under the guidance of Feng Yu and I, they have already learned some things and basically understood what happened in the past. Especially those elf archers, they are too smart. With their archery skills, there is no problem for them to go to the battlefield. Hearing the word elf, Nian Bing couldn't help but blush. Last time when he was asked to mate with that elf beauty, he still didn't forget the embarrassment. Brother Pingchao, after Fengyu finishes her cultivation, please tell her that no matter how the lost continent is opened up by the 4 great empires, there will be a way out for these survivors. I will strive to ask the 4 great empires to build a city for them. Let the dwarves and elves continue to live on. Chapter 243. Ping Chao smiled faintly and said, "Thank you. This is the first time I've seen Yu so serious about something. She seems to really treat those refugees as her own people. For Yu and those poor guys, I really have to thank you." Although he hadn't been in contact with Nian Bing for long, Ping Chao understood that the young man in front of him held an important position in the Yangon continent. Even the upper echelons of the 4 empires respected him, and the strength that Nian Bing displayed in the battle today made him admire him from the bottom of his heart. After all, he alone killed 3 of the enemy's god-ranked experts. If it wasn't for him, the enemy's overgods and god-ranked experts wouldn't have been able to stop them. On the side of the Yangon continent, Nian Bing could be said to be the number 1 expert. After leaving Ping Chao and Yu's tent, Nian Bing directly returned to his temporary tent. Feng Nu and Lan Chen were girls, and Nian Bing deliberately let the 7 blade souls protect them during the battle, so they didn't suffer any injuries. Now, together with Long Ling, they were helping the Ice God Tower's magicians to check their potential and arrange the next attack and defense. After all, the magicians were the only ones who could use large-scale joint magic. Whether it was Luo Ro or the leaders of the 4 empires, they attached great importance to this magician force. After returning to the tent, Nian Bing could no longer endure the weakness in his body. He immediately sat down on the ground. The battle today had consumed too much of his energy. The extreme tremors in his mental strength, as well as the continuous use of his domain, had taken a huge toll on him. Not only was his mana almost depleted, even his endless supply of mental strength was almost depleted. If it weren't for his stubbornness, if he didn't persevere, he probably wouldn't have been able to hold on. After today's battle, he had unknowingly become the spiritual leader of the Yangon continent's allied forces. Previously, when he was outside, even in front of his uncle and Luo Ro, he couldn't show any signs of fatigue. Otherwise, their confidence would suffer a huge blow. He came out early to see Yu, but the other reason was that he wanted to seize the time to recover his mental strength and magic power. Nian Bing possessed the vigorous Xiantian Qi, and her body naturally had the ability to recover. However, that kind of recovery was too slow. Only by entering a meditative state could he recover as much as possible. In these extraordinary times, without powerful strength as a guarantee, how could it work? Especially after listening to the words of the dragon god before his death, Nian Bing was even more aware of her own shortcomings. The speed of the retreat of the gods was very fast. When they retreated, it only took a moment for them to completely disappear from the sight of the Rangoon army, but in fact, they did not go far. They set up camp at the foot of a mountain 50 miles away from the Rangoon continent. The reason why they chose this place was naturally because of the terrain. It was easier to arrange accommodation on the mountain. Moreover, from a distance, they could vaguely see the general movements of the human army. For these deities, it was extremely easy for them to carve out a few caves in this kind of earthen mountain. A day had passed since the start of the first battle. The gods were still resting in the mountain. Because the battle yesterday had left a deep impression on them, the prideful gods actually sent out some demigod-level gods as scouts. They patrolled the surroundings. 10,000 years ago, the battle between the lost continent and the godly mainland was extremely difficult. After a long period of time, the number of deities was sharply reduced in that battle. After 10,000 years of recuperation, they had only recovered to about 10,000 deities. However, even in that battle, the loss of deities was gradually reduced by the special warriors of the lost continent. However, just yesterday, in just a short period of 2 hours, more than half of the 10,000 deities were lost. Such a blow could be said to be unprecedented in history. Even the ordinary gods were shocked to discover that the humans of the Rangoon continent were not as weak as they had imagined. Such a discovery caused the deities to feel apprehensive. If Shi Jie's tyrannical performance had not intimidated the other party and killed the dragon god who had betrayed the Rangoon army, the fear in the hearts of the gods would have been even greater. In the largest cave in the center of the mountain, Shi Jie was looking at the other gods with a gloomy face. When the army of deities retreated to this place, he immediately began to cultivate. It was only until now that he had woken up. At this moment, he was filled with anger after listening to the battle report. The death of close to 6,000 deities had caused his heart to be filled with murderous intent. Tell me, how did this happen? It has only been a few days since we left the godly mainland, and more than half of our invincible army of deities has been wiped out. What does this mean? If I hadn't blocked that large-scale super magic that day, I'm afraid this number would have increased by a lot. Can any of you tell me why there is such a large army waiting for us in the Rangoon continent? Can anyone tell me? Although Shi Jie's voice did not have a strong emotional fluctuation, the few gods who were familiar with him knew that the anger in his heart had risen to the peak. Below Shi Jie was a skinny god who looked to be in his 40s. He said, "It's because we were too confident in our own strength that we suffered such a huge loss. With our strength, although those humans are not weak, they shouldn't have been able to cause such a huge loss. The reason this happened was because we were ambushed and were completely passive. The other reason was because of the sudden betrayal of the dragons. I didn't expect that old thing, the dragon god, to choose to betray us at this time. We also underestimated the humans. There are more powerhouses among them than we thought. When we were fighting with them, the power of the territory that the blonde young man among them activated was extremely powerful. It seemed to be a pure energy territory, but it also seemed like a spiritual territory. The amplification effect was extremely terrifying. If it wasn't for his territory supporting those human powerhouses, the 4 of us would have killed them all. I feel that he is the biggest obstacle to us dominating this world. If we have the chance, we must destroy him first." Shi Jie's expression became slightly better. He nodded at the skinny god and said, "Lu Suo, as the god of exploration, you have 5 acupoints. You have 5 acupoints other than Lizhong and Tianyan. Your analysis is correct. We were indeed too careless. If we had discovered their layout earlier, our losses would have been minimized. What's the most reasonable thing for us to do after this? Just tell us." A tall god next to Lu Suo snorted and said, "That old thing, the dragon god, has been killed by boss. The only ones who pose a real threat to us are those human powerhouses. As long as we are careful this time, we can face them head-on. I don't believe that they can stop us from charging at them head-on. We, the 5 great gods, will join forces. Who can stop us?" This person's voice was loud and clear. He was wearing a yellow armor. When he spoke, his entire body emitted a layer of arrogant hostility. Other than Shi Jie and the god of exploration, Lu Suo, the other 2 gods nodded at his words. It was obvious that they had done the same thing. Only by defeating the human army head-on would they be able to vent their resentment. Shi Jie snorted in disdain and said, "Huangjuan, you're very domineering as the overlord god, but what were you doing in yesterday's battle? Were you sleepwalking? Humans are very intelligent, don't forget. Before we became gods, we were also humans. If they could beat us back the first time, they might be able to do it a second time. It's fine if we don't move, but if we attack again, we must completely destroy them. Therefore, we have to be very careful in all of our operations. We don't want to fall into their trap again. What about you guys? Tell me what you think." He looked at the other 2 core gods. The god standing furthest from the group frowned slightly and said, "Boss, although Kwangjuan is a little reckless, looking at the current situation, it seems that we don't have a good idea other than to do this. The rations we brought from the godly mainland are almost depleted these few days, especially drinking water, which is very scarce now. Our original plan was to kill the survivors of the lost continent and plunder their resources to support the Yangon continent. As long as we get there, we won't have to worry about supplies anymore. However, we are now blocked by the humans of the Yangon continent. We have two choices now. One is to go around them and reach the Yangon continent as soon as possible. After obtaining supplies, we'll show these humans how powerful we are. The other way is to completely defeat the human alliance in front of us and plunder their supplies. They have so many humans, so their supplies are definitely not a small number. It should be enough for us to use. The person who came back last time said that there is a large water source where the survivors live. Therefore, after killing these humans, we can still rest for a while before going to the Yangon continent." "No, how can we go around them? I can't take this lying down." The tyrant god Kwangjuan's eyes shone fiercely as his fighting aura fluctuated unsteadily. It was as if he was going to devour them. In terms of combat power, he was the strongest among the 5 master gods in the Shi realm. Shi Jie raised his hand to stop Kwangjuan from getting angry and said, "Yes, Noah's words are very reasonable. As the wisdom god among the gods, his judgment is very correct. Now we really only have these two choices. However, I won't choose the first one, not only for the dignity of the gods, but also for the sake of the facts. To be honest, 10,000 years have passed and I have forgotten how big the lost continent is. From here to the Yangon continent we can either split the space and directly travel through it or we have to walk there. Although we can achieve the effect of space magic with our abilities, our subordinates don't have the ability to do so. So we can't use this method. Therefore, we can only walk to the Yangon continent. However, we don't know how far this distance is and how long it will take. Once it takes too long, the combat power of the gods will be greatly reduced. On the other hand, the humans have sufficient supplies. If they chase after us from behind and meet up with the army in charge of guarding the Yangon continent, it will be very bad for us. Since they can intercept and kill us here, they must be prepared at the border between the Yangon continent and the lost continent. Therefore, we can only choose the first option that Noah mentioned. Only by killing these humans and plundering their supplies can we safely reach the Yangon continent. Now, what we need to do is not only to destroy them, but also to minimize our losses. We only have about 4,000 people now, and we can't afford to lose any more. There are 4 empires in the Yangon continent with tens of millions of people. Although we are gods, there are times when we are exhausted. Therefore, we need to maintain enough strength. Yes, I agree with the boss's suggestion. Let's do it this way. Let's come up with a good plan and kill every single one of them. In fact, I thought so too. It seems that the boss and I really think alike. The only overgod who hadn't spoken up until now finally spoke up. His broken gong sound immediately caused the other overgods to reveal looks of disdain. The tyrant god, Kwang Yun, was the one who couldn't hide the most. He snorted disdainfully and said, "Cyan, should I call you the god of lasciviousness or the god of flattery? If you hadn't been so timid in yesterday's battle, maybe we would have killed all those humans." Cyan was slightly angry and said, "Kwang Yun, be polite. I'm telling the truth. My name is the Silver God. I like all kinds of gems, not some damn god of lasciviousness. You've been insulting me for 10,000 years. Haven't you insulted me enough?" The wisdom god, Noah, was obviously on Kwang Yun's side. He sneered and said, "Silver God? You are clearly the god of lasciviousness. On the continent of gods, who doesn't know that you have a wide range of interests? You can't even let go of a female beast. Among those low-level divine servants, I'm afraid only a few have been defiled by you. Our king god's long life is the most thorough use by you. If it weren't for the limited number of gods, I'm afraid that at least millions of women would have been killed by you in these 10,000 years. Cyan's appearance was extremely obscene. If Nian Bing was here to observe him carefully, she would find his eyes very familiar. Because his eyes were clearly similar to Kitty's pet fox. They were both obscene, but this silver god's eyes were more obscene. Cyan saw that no one was helping him and muttered, "Forget it, I know you're jealous of me. I won't say anything." Noah ignored him and turned to Shi Jie and said, "Boss, since you have now decided on our direction of action, then we must act quickly. Otherwise, without food and water, the fighting power of our gods will gradually decline." Shi Jie just nodded and was about to say something when a voice suddenly came from outside the cave. "That's great, boss. That's great." A hurried figure flashed into the cave. Cyan, who had been holding his breath, now found a target to vent his anger. A golden light flashed in his hand and a surge of combat energy suddenly collided with the person who came. He shouted angrily, "Which bastard dares to barge in so rashly?" The person who came suddenly screamed under the golden light. A milky white light came out of his body and resisted the attack of the golden light, but he still hit the stone wall in the cave heavily. "Cyan, stop." Shi Jie stopped the silver god, who was about to go forward and continue to attack. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes because the person who came was Xia Yu, who he had demoted to an ordinary god-level master. As a former king god, although Xia Yu was demoted, his strength was still stronger than an ordinary god-level master. If it were not for the fact that he did not have the Huangji acupoint, Cyan would not be his opponent. "Xia Yu, why are you so flustered? I seem to have heard you say something like, 'That's great.' Can you say that we are in a situation like this?" Although Shi Jie was a little dissatisfied with Cyan's sudden attack, he saw that it was Xia Yu. He did not blame Cyan anymore. After all, if Xia Yu could bring back more reliable information, the loss this time would not be so great. If it were not for the fact that the number of gods was greatly reduced, Shi Jie would have vented his anger on him. Xia Yu got up from the ground. She wiped the blood from her mouth and looked at Cyan with hatred. "Boss, oh no, Lord God," I said, "that's great, because we found a water source and food." Shi Jie's eyes moved. "Oh? Where did you find it? What did you find?" Xia Yu hurriedly said, "Not far from the foot of the mountain. Today, when I accidentally walked by the foot of the mountain, I suddenly felt the sound of a water vein underground. You know it too. I also have the cloud listening acupoint. My hearing is definitely not wrong. Then I asked a few demigods to dig up the place according to what I found. In the end, not only did they find drinkable water, but there was also a type of fatty fish in the water. With these fish and water, although it is not enough to satisfy the food needs of all gods, it greatly alleviates our current situation. That's why I disturbed you when I came in just now." Tyrant God laughed and said, Good job, Xia Yu. Who said you were the god of misfortune? I think you should be called the god of fortune instead. Damn it, with water and food, those fellows from Yangon will die much easier. I'll go get some food first. I've been wanting to eat for a long time." "Stop!" Shi Jie shouted at Tyrant God and Kuang-yun. He turned to Xia Yu and said, "Have you checked it yourself?" Xia Yu hurriedly nodded. She said, "I've checked it carefully. It's definitely a drinkable water source. The fish is also not bad. Although it's not very big, there are still quite a lot of them. Why don't I catch a few for you to check?" Shi Jie waved his hand and said, "No need. Kuang-yun, go ahead and check it again carefully. We gods are indeed taken care of by the heavens. It seems that unifying this world is the mission given to us by the heavens." Wisdom God Noah frowned and said, "Water vein? Why is there a water vein here? Isn't this too much of a coincidence? Could it be a ploy by those humans?" Xian looked at him with disdain and said, "Are those humans crazy? They give us food and water, and then wait for us to chop their heads off? I say, Noah, don't think of everything as so complicated. This is an opportunity given to us by the heavens. Don't forget, we are gods. With Boss here, even the heavens have to give us some leeway. This food and water is used by the heavens to please Boss. Noah glared at Sion and said, I really want to chop you to death, you idiot. Sion did not back down and said, Come at me if you can. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Other than him, the only one he was not afraid of was wisdom god Noah. All right, stop arguing. Since the situation has changed, we should also change our strategy. Noah, send some people to observe the movements of the humans from the Yangon continent. Order our people to rest here. We will move in a few days. Noah said, Boss, as the saying goes, the first drum of energy, the second will weaken, and the third will be exhausted. I think it's better for us to act as soon as possible. Otherwise, if there are any changes, I'm afraid we won't even have the chance to regret. Shijie said indifferently, I know what to do. Although our army is not moving, it doesn't mean that our actions are completely stagnant. Tonight, the four of you will make a trip. With your abilities, it won't be difficult to infiltrate the human alliance. I'll give you a mission. The mission is simple. Kill the young man who used spiritual energy to attack. Under the premise of ensuring your own safety and completing the mission, do your best to kill the enemy powerhouses. They know how to ambush, but don't we know how to launch a sneak attack? Naturally, he did not expect the Yangon continent's alliance to be prepared for a sneak attack. However, he still gave such an order. After all, Sion, Noah, and the others were all at the level of overgods. They all had earth spirit points, and 2 of them even had cloud listening points. With the ability of their acupuncture points, it would not be difficult to infiltrate the human alliance. No matter how strong Nianbing was, it would not be difficult for the 4 overgods to kill him. At least, that was what Shijie thought. Noah looked at Shijie and immediately understood the king of overgods' intention. He nodded gently and retreated. Sion said hesitantly, Boss, I was injured that day. Why don't we let the 3 of them go today? I won't make a difference. Shijie looked at him coldly and said, Are you trying to challenge my authority? Serene, don't use your wits on me, or else. Otherwise, I'll make you regret being born into this world. I heard that there's a kind of person in the palace of the human world called eunuchs. If we turn you into a eunuch, I think the female gods under us will be very happy. Sion's face stiffened and he immediately said righteously, Boss, don't worry. I promise to complete the mission tonight. He's just an ordinary human. I won't kill him. I won't come back to see you. What a joke. The most precious thing in this world was the little bug below him. Without that thing, what was the point of living? The overgods retreated and Shijie was the only one left in the cave. His face suddenly changed and his breathing became heavier. Naturally, he knew the principle of finishing the mission in one go. However, if it was not a last resort, he would not do it. He definitely did not want to do that. Other than himself, no one knew how serious his injuries were. Although the battle with the dragon god seemed peaceful, only the 2 of them knew how dangerous it was. The dragon god's powerful abilities and extremely strong dragon body were enough to pose a threat to Shijie. Furthermore, he had blocked 2 powerful magic spells and had no choice but to go all out in the battle with the dragon god. After the dragon god was killed, his injuries worsened under the effect of the dragon language magic. Until now, he had only recovered about 40%. If it were not for the fact that he had 3 ultimate Emperor acupoints, he would have perished together with the dragon god. He wanted to recover to his best condition. He needed at least 15 days. He was more or less wary of human mages, and through his observation of the human army, he could tell that the human mages were very powerful. Based on his observation of the human alliance, it was obvious that there was an expert guiding them. If he wanted to destroy the magicians in the war, there was only one way, and that was to step over the corpses of all the warriors and strong opponents. However, Shi Jie could not let the other overgods know the extent of his injuries. Although they knew that he was injured, if they knew that Shi Jie was so severely injured, the position of Overgod King would change. The position of Overgod King could control all the god. Hegemon God Kuang Yun had been coveting this position for a long time. He was definitely not as boorish as he appeared to be. Shi Jie was deeply aware of this. Night fell. After tonight, the first battle would have been over for 2 days. Nian Bing stood at the entrance of her tent and breathed in the slightly cool air. She wondered if the overgods had discovered the water vein. Naturally, the water vein was not naturally formed. With the dark demon rat, it was not difficult to drill a tunnel and then lead the lake water from their side into it. Naturally, the water vein was formed. As for the fish, it was even simpler. How did the survivors of the lost continent survive? It was these fish that gave them the ability to survive. The fish in the lake were their only food. When the water in the lake was pumped up by the magicians, Luo Ro discovered that there were many of these fish. Now that the survivors of the lost continent had food from the Rangoon Continent's alliance, they no longer needed to eat fish. To them, ordinary coarse grain was much more delicious than the fish that they had been eating since they were young. Night gradually fell and the moonlight was as gentle as water. Nian Bing smiled as she looked at the sky. Luo Ro's overall arrangement had begun. The human army's greatest advantage was their supplies and numbers. However, was this advantage really that obvious? Nian Bing's strength had completely recovered. The special characteristics of his acupuncture points allowed him to recover much faster than ordinary people. However, he was very worried now. Whenever he thought about the strength displayed by the Heavenly Hope World, he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. He knew that if he used his spiritual power to attack the Heavenly Hope World directly, the chances of success would be at most 30%. Shi Jie must have known about his abilities. Under the circumstances where he was prepared, he who had 3 extreme Emperor acupuncture points would definitely be able to hide his spiritual energy very deeply. To be able to reach his level of strength, there was no doubt that he had a strong will. Taking a deep breath, Nian Bing returned to his tent and began to cultivate. Although he could only sharpen his spear at the last minute, this was the only thing he could do before the war began. The 2 sisters, Feng Nu and Lan Chen, were in charge of patrolling the night. Kitty stuck her head out and looked around as she shuttled back and forth in the camp. She had grown up in the Valley of the Caucasians and was very interested in the formation of the army. That day, it could be said that she had made a great contribution. Her pets had killed countless divine servants with the help of Fox Na Na's super enhancement ability. The number of divine servants was definitely not less than the number of dragons. After all, among Kitty's pets, there were a few major magical beasts from the godly mainland. Although the death of the 9-clawed poisonous spider made her sad for a while, she did not raise it since it was young. Under everyone's consolation, she quickly returned to normal. Most of the soldiers in the camp had already rested. That battle had not only left a large number of injured people, but it had also dealt a huge blow to the morale of the human soldiers. After witnessing a battle between real powerhouses, they finally understood how insignificant they were. They needed to rest to recover their fighting spirit. Only groups of patrolling soldiers were shuttling back and forth between the camps, vigilant of every little change. Kitty ran out of her tent because she couldn't sleep. Looking at the moonlight in the sky, she said to herself, "Dad, Mom, I've already killed so many divine servants. I don't know if this counts as revenge for you. You must bless Kitty and brother Nian Bing. You must kill those divine servants and not leave a single one behind. Kill them all. They are simply too abominable. Even the dragon god was killed by them. Brother Garamandes is still sad. He's really pitiful, just like Kitty in the past." Kitty was a kind-hearted little girl. The death of her parents and clansmen had a great impact on her. It was also from then on that she gradually grew up and was no longer the innocent little girl she used to be. On the surface, although she didn't seem to have changed much, she had now learned to think. Suddenly, Kitty's mental strength fluctuated, and her beautiful little face suddenly showed a trace of astonishment. In terms of mental strength, Nian Bing was naturally the strongest in the Rangoon continent. But in addition to Nian Bing, Kitty was second. As a summoning magician, apart from pets, the only thing she could use to attack enemies was her spiritual power. With the spiritual power passed on to her by her parents, as well as her hard work these days, Kitty's spiritual power had made great progress. The sudden appearance of the spiritual wave gave her a fright. Her spiritual power immediately spread out to the surroundings. What made her a little scared was that she actually found 4 abnormally large amounts of energy at once. These energies were full of murderous intent. Obviously, they didn't belong to the strong people on her side. What's more, in her side, there were only 4 strong people of this level in front of her. She had to count Nian Bing's Emperor Kurobuts. Chapter 244. The sudden warning in Kitty's heart surprised her greatly, and at the same time, she was a little flustered. However, she quickly calmed down and stood still, because she could clearly feel that the aura of those 4 people was firmly locked on her. As long as she made the slightest movement, she was afraid that they would immediately attack her crazily. Therefore, she could not move. However, as a summoning magician who was beyond the level of a magus, Kitty naturally had her own way. She controlled her psychic power and quietly slipped to the side. Although there was some distance between where she and Nian Bing lived, her psychic power was enough to transmit to her. At the same time, she also sent out a signal for help. The psychic power she transmitted was very subtle. Only the most powerful would be able to sense it. 4 faint figures appeared out of thin air. One of them quietly disappeared, while the other 3 turned into phantoms from 3 different directions and pounced toward Kitty. The highest level of a summoning magician was to use the ability of a summoned beast as their own in an instant. However, at the same time, the faint light locked onto Kitty's body. However, at this moment, the 3 figures clearly felt that the psychic power they had locked onto was empty. At this moment, they immediately launched an attack without hesitation. Kitty's body shattered, but it was only a phantom that shattered. A huge cockroach appeared on the ground. It looked at the 3 over-gods floating around it with its innocent eyes. With a flash, its body instantly became the size of an ordinary cockroach. It drilled through the 2 over-gods and directly disappeared into the crack in the ground. The sudden change shocked the 3 over-gods. They had sneaked into the allied army of the Rangoon continent to kill Nian Bing. However, the allied army camp was very large. It was not easy to find Nian Bing's residence. With Nian Bing's psychic power, it was too easy for her to make some camouflage simulated psychic forms. Therefore, they were prepared to capture someone to ask where Nian Bing was. Soon, they found Kitty wandering in the camp. Kitty's pet army had left a deep impression on them. In terms of damage to ordinary gods, Kitty's pets were comparable to dragons. Under the stimulation of Fox's special ability, each of his pets was more terrifying than the last. Only the 9-clawed poisonous spider died after its leg was cut off. The other pets had all retreated unscathed after achieving great result. Therefore, as soon as the 4 overgods saw her, they immediately felt that they were in luck. With Kitty's strength, she was obviously a core member of the allied army. Naturally, she would know Nian Bing's whereabouts. Moreover, even if she could not find Nian Bing, killing such an expert who was enough to threaten them, it was not a wasted trip. Therefore, they separated Overlord and Kwang Jun to guard at the side, while the other 3 went all out to catch Kitty. In their minds, even if Kitty was a little stronger, it was impossible for her to escape from the 3 overgods. However, they forgot that Kitty was not only a summoner, but also a psychic magician. Relying on her psychic power to simulate her body shape and aura, Kitty had already summoned Xiangqiang the cockroach when she discovered them. light and shadow flashed. Kitty appeared more than 10 feet away. As soon as Qiangqiang's phantom disappeared, her original body, which had secretly escaped, was naturally exposed. At the moment when the overgods were stunned, silver light flashed around Kitty's body. The golden cow Dandy, the chrysanthemum pig Guan, and the dark demon mouse Tian and her son appeared almost at the same time. In the sudden golden light, Kitty's body rose, and the golden light appeared. It was the nine-tailed dragon, Little Stutterer. The originally empty space in the camp was completely filled. When the 3 overgods reacted, for magical beasts had already pounced on them. At the same time, 2 loud phoenix cries sounded at the same time. Damn it! The silver deity Cyan cursed unwillingly. The 3 overgods punched at the same time, and the 4 magical beasts that were pouncing on them were sent flying back at a faster speed than when they came, crashing into the tents at the side. Suddenly, screams sounded one after another. The Rangoon continent's allied army was suddenly awakened by the loud phoenix cries, and a large number of troops appeared from their respective camps. 2 rays of red and blue light appeared at the same time when the 3 overgods rushed toward Kitty. 2 different auras of ice and fire instantly filled the air. Seeing the golden light radiating from the 3 overgods, Feng Nu and Lan Chen's first reaction was to protect Kitty. Their figures instantly entered the 8th change of the phoenix. The huge body of the phoenix met the attacks of the 3 overgods in the bright red and blue light. At this time, the 7-colored light had already lit up on one side of the camp. Suddenly receiving Kitty's call for help, Nian Bing immediately woke up from her cultivation and rushed here as fast as she could. 7 sword souls appeared out of thin air, only slightly slower than Feng Nu and Lan Chen. They rushed toward the 3 overgods from behind. Nian Bing used teleportation magic to follow behind the 7 sword souls. However, just as the 7 sword souls flashed by, a tall black figure happened to intercept them. A huge fist went straight for Nian Bing's chest. With the aura locked, a huge golden light pillar with a diameter of 5 feet enveloped Nian Bing's body. The tyrant god's hidden purpose was to wait for Nian Bing to come to her rescue. He deliberately did not stop the 7 sword souls, and when Nian Bing appeared, he suddenly attacked. The wisdom god Noah shouted, "Kill these 2 phoenixes first." Ignoring the approaching sword souls behind them, the 3 overgods' bodies instantly became illusory. Under the effect of the earthly spirit point, they charged forward at a speed faster than Feng Nu and Lan Chen. The ultimate realm of the Emperor Acupoint burst forth in an instant, and a golden light went straight for the 2 huge phoenixes. The suffocating surging energy immediately caused the originally agile ice and fire phoenixes to feel as if they had sunk into a swamp. At this time, they still had the ability to escape. In the 8th phoenix transformation, they were completely capable of flying high into the air before the 3 overgods' attacks arrived. However, they had no intention of dodging at all. This was because Kitty was right behind them. Although Kitty was protected by Little Stutterer, the 9 dragonettes, she would only end up being killed in an instant when faced with the attacks of the 3 overgods. The 2 sisters, Feng Nu and Lan Chen, were telepathically connected. The ice and fire energies were instantly activated to their strongest state. With an indomitable aura, they faced the attacks of the 2 overgods head-on. Nian Bing's current situation was also very bad. After being sealed by the overbearing energy from the Emperor Acupoint, he was completely unable to teleport at all. Although Nian Bing had an extraordinary physique, he was still a mage. However, he was still a magician. In terms of physical combat, even a martial saint would be able to beat him to a pulp, let alone a core god. At this critical juncture, Nian Bing's rich combat experience played a decisive role. His charging body instantly retreated half a step when the golden light appeared. Immediately after, a golden light erupted from between his eyebrows. His hands lit up with red and blue light respectively, and he clasped them in front of him. Nian Bing also had the ultimate Emperor Acupoint. However, He had never used it in the form of an energy attack. At this time, facing the attack of the Emperor Acupoint, the Sky Eye domain was no longer effective. Thus, he chose the most direct method. With the help of his spiritual power, Nian Bing's Emperor Acupoint pierced into the Tyrant God's attack like a needle. The moment the two Emperor Acupoint's energies collided in the air, a golden light burst out. After all, Nian Bing's attack was rushed. Furthermore, the Emperor Acupoint appeared in the same position as the Sky Eye Acupoint. Although the Sky Eye Acupoint had a great support and amplification effect, its attack power was not as good as the Emperor Acupoint that the Tyrant God had cultivated for who knew how many years. Furthermore, the Tyrant God was waiting to attack. The golden light from his right fist only paused for a moment before swallowing the attack from Nian Bing's forehead. However, this slight pause gave Nian Bing an opportunity. A huge ice prism appeared diagonally in front of him. Although the huge mirror, which was a mixture of red and blue light, was shattered by the golden light released by Hegemon God, it still reflected the attack of Nian Bing's extreme Emperor Acupoint into the sky, illuminating the entire camp. After dealing with the Tyrant God's surprise attack, Nian Bing did not feel the slightest bit excited. She cried out involuntarily, "Dodge!" His gaze just happened to see the illusory figures of Noah and the other two overgods rushing in front of Feng Nu and her sister. His heart instantly sank to the bottom. He was very familiar with the strength of overgods. Without any support, the result of going head-on against an overgod was obvious. Although the sword souls were fast, they were still about 10 feet away from the three overgod. Although they would arrive in the next instant, that short moment was enough for an overgod to do many things. The Tyrant God was extremely pleased with himself as he attacked Nian Bing. In his opinion, Nian Bing's strongest strength was the 7 sword souls and the supportive magical domain. Ordinary magic was completely useless against his combat energy. Even when he saw Nian Bing's Emperor Acupoint attack, he did not take Nian Bing seriously. Even if a young man was strong and talented, there was no way he could be compared to him, who had cultivated for tens of thousands of years. However, although his attack reached Nian Bing, it was cleverly neutralized by Nian Bing. At this moment, it was not that Kuang Yun did not want to continue attacking, but that he could not attack for the time being. Nian Bing's Emperor Acupoint was indeed inferior to his, but her mental strength was higher than his. When faced with Kuang Yun's Emperor Acupoint energy, the golden light that shot out from between Nian Bing's eyebrows not only contained the energy of the Emperor Acupoint, but also her own powerful mental strength. When the two energies of the Emperor Acupoint collided, the mental strength passed through and accurately entered Kuang Yun's body. Although this was not enough to kill him, there was a sudden piercing pain in his brain. The intense vibration of the mental strength caused Kuang Yun's body to stop moving for a moment. At the same time, he remembered the few god-ranked experts who had died under Nian Bing's mental strength attack. He hurriedly stabilized his mental strength and cautiously looked at Nian Bing, preventing her from launching another mental attack on him. In fact, Nian Bing's body was also greatly shaken. Mental strength attacks were originally meant to harm the enemy as well as oneself. Among the gods, Hegemon God Kuang Yun was second only to the overgod of the Hope World. His mental strength was extremely stable. Although Nian Bing's attack had caused a certain amount of damage to him, Nian Bing himself was also heavily injured. Moreover, although he had reflected the attack from the Emperor Acupoint, his opponent's sudden full-force attack had still injured Nian Bing's meridians. He screamed for Feng Nu and Lan Chen to dodge, but he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. If the god of time of the true gods was here, perhaps he would have the ability to freeze time in an instant. However, there was no one here who could control time like him. Therefore, what was supposed to happen had happened in the end. When Feng Nu and Long Ling's full-force phoenix flames came into contact with the attacks of the three overgods, they could clearly feel the difference between the Sky Eye field and the Sky Eye field. There was a huge difference between a level 13 and a level 14. Moreover, it was 3 level 14 masters attacking 2 level 13 phoenixes. There was only one outcome, and that was instant kill. The reason why the wisdom god Noah did not hesitate to endure the attacks from the 7 sword souls behind him to launch a full-force attack on the ice and fire phoenixes was for this instant kill. Although the sword souls could hurt them, they definitely could not kill them. If they could kill the ice and fire phoenixes, the strength of the Rangoon continent's allied forces would be greatly reduced. Moreover, behind the ice and fire phoenixes was the allied forces' only summoner. As long as they could kill all 3 girls, even if they did not succeed in killing Yen Bing this time, their mission would have been completed perfectly. Kitty saw the 2 sisters who loved her bravely facing the enemy, and the 4 pets she had pounced on previously were still alive. At this critical moment, she did not hesitate to launch a psychic energy attack at the 3 over-god. As a psychic magician, she instantly dispersed her psychic energy to give Feng Nu and Lan Chen a chance to escape. Even if she knew what would happen to her if her 2 sisters left, she still did not hesitate to do so. When Yen Bing shouted, she launched a psychic energy attack while shouting anxiously at the same time. However, Feng Nu and Lan Chen had already made up their minds when they discovered the 3 over-gods. They saw the appearance of the 7 sword souls, and also saw Ma Luan's short and stout figure rushing over at the fastest speed. Bing Jie and Bing Ling were also in the midst of preparing their magic. As long as they could block the attacks of the 3 over-gods, Kitty would be safe. In the hearts of Feng Nu and Lan Chen, Kitty had always been their favorite little sister. Her innocence was deeply loved by everyone. Moreover, she was already the last member of the white race. If she died like this, the white race would really disappear from this continent forever. How could they watch their cute little sister die like this? They had heard Nian Bing's call, and they had also heard Kitty's cry. However, they still faced the attacks of the over-gods. At the moment when they were about to collide with the intense golden light, the 2 girls' phoenix-like eyes shone brightly on Yen Bing. There was no sadness, only deep attachment. Kitty's spiritual magic attack was not weak. However, when her spiritual magic was divided into 3 and faced the 3 over-gods, the only effect it had was to slightly slow down the speed of the attacks of the 3 over-gods. However, the golden light still swallowed up all the blue and red light, as well as the 2 beautiful figures. Seeing his 2 wives disappear, Nian Bing's heartbeat instantly stopped. Even if he had a strong vitality and a recovery magic that could bring the dead back to life, it was impossible for him to revive his wife, who had been reduced to powder. Immense sorrow instantly spread to every cell in his body. Nian Bing's eyes instantly turned blood-red. Without any hesitation, his spiritual energy poured out. He no longer cared about who he was facing and shot out his physical spiritual attack from his Tian Yen acupoint without any reservation. The light was like lightning, and Hegemon God Kuang Yun had no chance of dodging at all. He could only grit his teeth and bear the attack while launching his attack. The same golden light appeared on the 2 of them. There was the golden light from his own attack, and there was also the golden light from his opponent's attack. This was a strange and tragic battle. Nian Bing's attack was completely made of spiritual energy. He did not even try to block Hegemon God Kuang Yun's Huang Ji acupoint's energy. The physical spiritual attack passed through his opponent's attack and directly entered Kuang Yun's body. Kuang Yun's full-powered attack also went straight for Nian Bing's defenseless body. At this moment, perhaps because of the intense sorrow in his heart, Nian Bing's Fangjia acupoint, which had just emitted a milky white light, suddenly turned golden. At this moment, his acupuncture points had actually evolved, and not just the Fangjia acupoint. At the same time, the West Meridian acupoint, which was closely related to the Fangjia acupoint, also evolved to the ultimate realm. If it was any other time, Nian Bing would have been overjoyed to suddenly feel a huge increase in his strength. But now there was only despair and sorrow in his heart. With a loud bang, his body was sent flying, landing directly hundreds of feet away. Kwang Yun's title of Hegemon God did not come out of nowhere. Although the ultimate realm of the Fang Jia acupoint was enough to block many attacks, it could not block his full-powered attack. That solidified golden light smashed through the defense of the Fang Jia acupoint like a giant hammer and forcibly shook Nian Bing's chest. At that moment, Yi Zichen was stunned. Inside Nian Bing's body, the little Dragon King, Oscar, wanted to rush out to help Nian Bing block this fatal attack more than once, but Nian Bing forcibly suppressed him with his spiritual energy. If Oscar had been the one to block the Tyrant God's all-out attack, Nian Bing might have been able to survive. However, Oscar would have disappeared from this world forever. Nian Bing had already lost 2 of his wives. How could he lose his partner as well? Until the moment when the golden light was about to touch his body. Nian Bing released Oscar, and at the same time, a surge of vitality was released. Oscar's recent cultivation of the Dragon God's Heart Sutra was extremely fast. Although leaving Nian Bing's body would greatly affect the speed of his growth, it was no longer fatal. Therefore, under such circumstances, Oscar was released by Nian Bing. He naturally understood that Nian Bing was going to bear the opponent's attack alone, and despair appeared in his heart at the same time. Ever since he was born, he had gained wisdom. He had never been separated from Nian Bing for a day. To him, Nian Bing was a friend, an elder brother, and also gave him the care of a father. Every time Nian Bing cultivated, he would deliberately condense a large amount of Xiantian Qi and inject it into his body. Otherwise, how could his Dragon God's Heart Sutra have improved so many times in such a short time? At the same time when Nian Bing's spiritual energy rushed into Hegemon God's body, his body instantly froze, and a golden mist drifted out from his 7 apertures. His eyes became a little dull, and his tall body swayed. He roared fiercely, and 7 pillars of blood spurted out from his 7 apertures, dyeing his domineering face red. A surge of blood suddenly shot out from his lower abdomen, and a large amount of fire attribute Xiantian Qi suddenly rushed up and rushed into his brain. Now, only a large amount of Xiantian Qi could resist Nian Bing's spiritual energy. Nian Bing's attack in his despair was too terrifying, and the mental shackles that Kwang Yun thought were firm were broken one by one. At this time, he had no choice. In order to save his life, he had no choice but to choose to explode his West Meridian acupoint and use the Xiantian Qi to withstand the enormous pressure. His eyes had turned blood red, and the surging red light was extremely frightening. Exploding an acupoint could bring power beyond one's own strength. Although it was only for a short period of time, it was extremely terrifying for an overgod to explode. Even so, Kwang Yun's spiritual energy was still defeated by the Xiantian Qi from exploding his acupoints. This was the first time he felt fear, and this feeling was so real at this time. Kwang Yun panicked. He could clearly feel that the spiritual energy rushing into his brain was incomparably condensed, and it also carried the unique domineering aura of the Huangji acupoint. Blood kept dripping from his 7 apertures, and the thick red crystal necklace around his neck shattered, and a red stream of energy flowed into his body. He also had a super divine tool, and that was the fire crystal necklace that amplified his fire attribute Xiantian Qi. Although he rarely used his fire attribute Xiantian Qi after gaining the Huangji acupoint, this super divine tool grade necklace finally saved his life at this time. With the help of the necklace and the Xiantian Qi from exploding his acupoints, his spiritual energy went all out to contend with Nian Bing's spiritual energy. Seeing that short figure rushing towards him, even the arrogant Hegemon God had no choice but to retreat. After all, saving his own life was the best choice. Using the Earth Spirit Cave to escape was indeed a good choice. In that faint illusion, the Hegemon God's Kwang Yun fully embodied the traditions of a god. In a situation where he was heavily injured, he did not care about the other 3, and turned to run, causing Shu Luan's axe to hit empty air. Shu Luan did not chase after him. His figure turned in the air, and he rushed in another direction, straight towards the other three over-gods. In the instant when Nian Bing was blown away by that intense golden light, when his Fangjiao acupoint, which had displayed its ultimate defense for the first time, was broken, even he himself thought that he would follow Feng Nu and Lan Chun. At that moment, there was no longer any sadness or anger in his heart. Everything seemed to have become unimportant. Perhaps, following the woman he loved the most was the happiest thing in life. However, in the instant when his body was about to disappear under the attack of Kuang Yun's Huangji acupoint, at his chest, the two balls of light, one black and one white, in the Lizhong acupoint suddenly spun violently. A vigorous aura of life instantly protected his body, and a black light filled with deathly stillness appeared out of thin air, turning into an impenetrable solid shield. It forcibly blocked the golden light of the Huangji acupoint. The aura of life nourished his body, and the aura of death resisted the attacks from the outside world. Nian Bing's heart suddenly entered an ethereal state, and the magic in his body circulated at high speed. Although he still could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood, his body still came to a stop after smashing through a tent. Although he had suffered some serious injuries, the damage to his body was not very serious. Only the backlash of his mental strength caused his brain to feel dizzy. The sphere of life and the sphere of death protected Nian Bing's body at the most critical moment. Nian Bing, who had landed on the ground, was somewhat at a loss. He did not even know whether this outcome was a blessing or a tragedy for him. The seven sword souls were not idle. When Feng Nu and Lan Chun were turned into ashes under the ferocious attacks of the three over-gods, they had already arrived behind the three over-gods. Feng Nu and Lan Chun were 8 transformation phoenixes, after all. They had unleashed their greatest potential before dying. Although the three over-gods had destroyed them, under the effects of the 2 special rebounding forces of ice and fire, their bodies were shaken. Their bodies trembled at the same time, and their charging speed immediately slowed down. The 7 sword souls were telepathically connected to Nian Bing. The pain in Nian Bing's heart was their pain at the same time. They attacked Emperor Kurobutsu without holding back. 7 rays of light of completely different colors blasted into the bodies of the 3 over-gods. Halos of light circulated, and the powerful defensive power of the Fangjia acupoint saved the lives of the 3 over-gods. If it were not for the Fangjia acupoint's powerful defensive power, they would not have exposed their backs to the 7 sword souls. 3 mouthfuls of blood were spat out at the same time. The 3 over-gods actually used the momentum of the 7 sword souls' frenzied attacks to charge directly at Kitty. They could clearly sense what was happening to hegemon god Kuang Jun. Their goal was very simple. As long as they could kill Kitty, they could retreat unscathed. Although Kuang Jun's injuries were severe, they were not fatal. After all, Kuang Jun was not someone Xia you could compare to. Although exploding one of his West Meridian acupoints would greatly reduce his overall abilities, he could still maintain his strength as a over-god. However, he would be demoted from the second over-god to the weakest over-god. As long as the 3 of them could destroy Kitty, they would be able to greatly reduce the strength of the Human Alliance Army's powerhouses. Their goal for this sneak attack would be achieved. After all, the Sword Souls were not humans. Although they could think, they were still enraged by Nian Bing's actions. When they realized that the 3 over-gods were charging at Kitty at the same time, they could not stop them in time. The golden light appeared again. This time, the golden light's target was Kitty and Little Stutterer. At this moment, Kitty had calmed down. The deaths of Feng Nu and Lan Chun, as well as the despair in Nian Bing's eyes, had caused a drastic change in the little girl's mentality. Seeing the 3 over-gods charging at her, Kitty's eyes turned completely silver. She did not summon her own magical beasts. To her, every summoned beast had its own life. Since she could not block the enemy's attacks, why should she let them die in vain? Kitty's heart had always been very soft. However, at this moment, her heart was in intense pain, as if it was being bitten by a poisonous snake. When Feng Nu and Lan Chen looked at Nianbing before they left, her pure heart was deeply hurt. She did not plan to continue living because she did not know how to face her big brother Nianbing. If it were not for her, how could her two big sisters, Feng Nu and Lan Chen, have died? A faint silver light condensed in Kitty's eyes. At this moment, those distant and lifeless eyes actually emitted a substantial light. In the midst of despair and endless sorrow, Kitty's spiritual magic finally made another breakthrough. She became the second person after Nianbing to possess a substantial spiritual attack. This time, she only chose one target, the god of wisdom, Noah. The silver light in her eyes converged into a beam of light a foot in front of her, and suddenly shot towards Noah. Since she was going to die, she had to try her best to drag someone down with her. What Kitty was thinking now was that she could avenge her two big sisters at the same time as she died. Noah was shocked when he saw the silver light. Under the guidance of his spiritual power, he could clearly feel that Kitty's target was him. Without any hesitation, he immediately condensed his spiritual power. He did not know how Kitty's spiritual power was compared to Nianbing's, but the scene of the gods under him being attacked by a substantial spiritual attack was deeply engraved in his mind. He definitely did not want to become another victim of a substantial spiritual attack. In order to deal with Nianbing's substantial spiritual attack, he had already made some preparations before this sneak attack. While his forward momentum did not change, he quickly took out a milky white pearl from his chest. A milky white light instantly enveloped his head, and the silver light that shot out from Kitty's eyes arrived at the same time. This milky white pearl was one of the most precious ores on the mainland of gods. It was called the God Protection Crystal. The few over-gods had different choices for these precious ores. Even though Shi Jie was the most powerful among them, he could only choose one to forge that super-godly sword. As for the god of wisdom, Noah, he was the only one among the over-gods whose spiritual power could contend with Shi Jie's. In order to achieve the same level of strength as Shi Jie in the future, he had been working hard on his spiritual level cultivation, hoping to reach the level of a substantial spiritual attack. Therefore, he chose the God Protection Crystal, a special gem that could store spiritual power. The milky white pearl in his hand was the purest God Protection Crystal that had been refined countless times. It contained the spiritual power that he had accumulated. At this time, the external spiritual power and his own spiritual power actually resisted Kitty's attack. Although Noah still felt a little weak in his brain during the spiritual attack, he still succeeded. Chapter 245. Kitty was already right in front of her. As the golden light flickered, she actually withdrew the gigantic 9-headed dragon. She closed her eyes, and 2 drops of crystal-clear tears fell from the corners of Kitty's eyes. She was not sad because she was about to die, but because she was unwilling to accept that she had not killed a king before she died. Those were tears of unwillingness and despair. She knew that her fate could not be changed. Regardless of whether it was the 7 sword souls that were chasing after the gods at lightning speed or Shu Luan, who was flying at high speed from another direction, it was impossible for them to arrive before the 3 king gods attacked her. Since everything was destined, she could only accept it. In Kitty's heart, death was not something to be afraid of. She had always thought that death was just a way to go from one world to another. When she arrived at the other world, not only would she be able to see her 2 sisters who had died for her, but she would also be able to see her parents and clansmen. Although Big Brother Nianbing was not there, she was satisfied. Just as Kitty was prepared to accept her death, a sudden sound caused her to open her eyes again. When she opened her eyes again, they were filled with surprise. This was because the sound she heard was the resonant cry of a phoenix. That sound was so familiar. Although it sounded like the same voice, she could clearly distinguish 2 different feelings in that voice. One was ice and the other was fire. The camp on the mainland of Yangon was no longer shrouded in darkness because the darkness had been dispersed. Blue and red lights illuminated every corner of the camp. They were like two different suns that were emitting light that illuminated the earth. Those were flames. The red and blue flames appeared right in front of Kitty. The flames burned fiercely, and the huge flames rose to nearly 300 meters into the air. However, it did not cause a change in temperature. It was neither hot nor cold. However, the surging energy waves caused the three king gods to stop in their track. When they heard the resonant cry of a phoenix from the two flames, their hearts were filled with. There was no time for hesitation. They made a decision almost at the same time and turned around abruptly. The three of them combined their powers and repelled the seven sword souls that were chasing after them. The strange phenomenon that appeared in front of them made them feel that something was wrong. Now, running away seemed to be the best choice. All of this happened at the same time. When Yen Bing broke out of the tent and barely managed to stabilize himself, he happened to see the three main gods pouncing towards Kitty. He was just about to use his teleportation spell to save her when he saw the red and blue flames appear. What did the flame of 1,000 feet represent? Why didn't the flames have any temperature? At this moment, Yen Bing's eyes, which had been filled with despair, suddenly turned into ecstasy. This was because he thought of two words: Nirvana rebirth. It was a Nirvana rebirth that only belonged to the Phoenix clan. That's right, the Phoenix was known as the immortal bird. How could his wives die so easily? During the Great War of the Divine Remains, their ancestor, the Phoenix, was only able to block the attacks of so many chief gods because of its ability to be reborn from the ashes. Tears appeared in Yen Bing's eyes again. However, this time it was because of excitement. Two gigantic phoenixes in the form of flames appeared out of thin air. Each of them was 1,000 feet long. They stood upright in the air and spread their huge wings. Flames burned on every part of their bodies, and an indescribable feeling arose from their bodies. At first glance, the red flames did not seem to be any different from ordinary flames. However, upon closer inspection, one would realize that not only was there no heat generated from the red flames, but even the fiery red light was illusory. Yes, those were not real flames. Instead, they were the soul fire that came from the Phoenix's soul. Only through the burning of the soul fire could they be reborn from the ashes. The blue flames were the same as the red flames. They were both illusory soul fire. However, the red fire phoenix exuded an awe-inspiring aura of righteousness, while the blue fire phoenix exuded a surging aura of death. It did not bring with it an evil aura, but a pure aura of death. Enveloped by the aura of death, everyone could not help but tremble. This was also the reason why the three chief gods chose to retreat instead of continuing to attack when the two auras appeared at the same time. Yen Bing appeared in front of the two fire phoenixes and surrounded the three chief gods from behind. At the same time, Bing Ling and Bing Jie's magic arrived as well. Together with the seven sword souls and Bai Luan, they surrounded the three chief gods. Although Yen Bing was injured, she immediately activated her heavenly eye domain as soon as she appeared. A rainbow light enveloped the battlefield, and the seven sword souls and Bai Luan's attack power instantly increased. Under the ingenious control of her mental strength, when the two ice gods' spears shot out by Bing Ling and Bing Jie arrived, the power of the ice magic was immediately raised to the maximum with the help of the heavenly eye domain. Although the three chief gods resisted with all their might, they could only barely protect themselves from being injured. It was impossible for them to counterattack with a sneak attack. At this moment, Yen Bing and the rest's attacks were as strong as iron buckets. No matter which one they chose to attack, they would attract the combined attacks of all the experts on Yen Bing's side. Without a doubt, the chief gods had a long history. In such a passive situation, their 14th level strength immediately showed their advantage. Although Yen Bing's heavenly eye domain had a great effect, she could not attack again because of her battle with the tyrant god Kuang Yun earlier. As a result, the seven sword souls, together with Bai Luan and the two ice gods' descent masters, could only trap the three chief gods, but could not really hurt them. After all, it was not easy to break through the ultimate level of the Fangjia acupoint. Moreover, the three chief gods all had as many as 5 acupoints. Every single one of them was shining with golden light as they dealt with the attacks. The 2 giant phoenixes in the sky began to change. Their burning soul flames gradually converged. When the flames converged to a height of around 30 meters, the nirvanic rebirth process was finally complete. 2 perfect phoenixes appeared in the sky. Compared to their 8th transformation, their bodies were several times larger. Every single feather was slender and translucent. In particular, their resplendent eyes shone with a dazzling luster like gemstones in the night sky. The fire phoenix opened its mouth slightly and a red flame descended from the sky. The flame was only as thick as an arm, but when it entered Nian Bing's heavenly eye domain, it could not be detected. However, when it entered the heavenly eye domain, Nian Bing could clearly sense that her heavenly eye domain had no effect on this special flame. It could neither strengthen nor weaken it. She suddenly thought of the legend of the Feng people that Feng Yen had told her when she was in the Feng people's territory. The strongest ability of the Feng people was the true phoenix fire. Could this be the true phoenix fire? If that was the case, then Feng Nu and Lan Chun must have reached the 9th transformation of the phoenix. In other words, they were already real phoenixes now. There had always been only one phoenix, but this time there were 2. Just as Nian Bing was thinking, the fire phoenix's flame had already descended on the silver god Xian. Xian naturally did not want to be burned by this flame. However, the 3 overgods had to face multiple attacks at the same time, and he was the weakest one among them. When the Phoenix Truefire arrived, he was knocked back by Si Luan's full-powered axe strike under the buff of Sky's eye domain. Si Luan, in his berserk state, possessed terrifying strength, and with the help of Sky's eye domain and 2 supra-artifact, he could contend with an overgod. In the head-on clash with Saiyan, Xian was immediately pushed back, and he happened to be enveloped by the true Phoenix Fire. What was the greatest characteristic of the true Phoenix Fire? That was to destroy all defensive energy obstacles. Nian Bing's heavenly eye domain could not affect the true Phoenix Fire, and Xian's square armor acupuncture point naturally could not do it. A burnt smell came, and Xian's body instantly turned black. From top to bottom, all of his hair turned into flying ash. It was a critical moment. He hurriedly raised his hands to block, and stimulated a surge of energy in his Huangji acupuncture point. This barely blocked the true Phoenix Fire. However, once the 3 overgods lost one of their attacks, they were immediately unable to fend off the experts from the Yangon continent led by Nian Bing. Although the overgods had the advantage of speed brought by the earthly spirit cave, this advantage did not have a good effect in front of Nian Bing. Under the gaze of the heavenly eye acupuncture point, what kind of speed could not follow? The 7 sword souls were telepathically connected with Nian Bing. After the heavenly eye acupuncture point easily found the direction of the overgod's movement, the 7 sword souls could often intercept and kill them on the way. At this time, the overgods' bodies would inevitably pause. As long as there was a slight pause, the ice magic and Bai Luan's god-slaying axe would fall on them. The flames of the ice phoenix were not much slower than the flames of the fire phoenix. The blue light was filled with a deathly aura. Compared to the true phoenix fire of the fire phoenix, the blue true phoenix fire was less gorgeous, but more profound. The blue light floated down and directly entered the battle circle. Its target was the silver god Xian. However, this time it did not really fall on Xian. At the side, the god of wisdom, Noah, suddenly let out a loud roar. His illusory body simultaneously released several tens of surging auras that could cause the weather to change. The instant the people surrounding them were pushed back, he pressed his palm into the air, blocking the true phoenix fire that the ice phoenix had released. Go! In a situation where there were so many human masters and there was no backup, retreating was the best choice. Among the overgods, he hated Scene the most. However, he had no choice but to help Serene at this moment. The attack power of the two flames had clearly reached level 14. If Serene died under their combined attack, then all three of them would have to die here today. Therefore, he did not hesitate to use his ability to force the surrounding Rangoon powerhouses to retreat and rescue Serene. With their speed, this was the best chance to escape. The silver god Cyan had always been the most cunning among the main gods. Seeing Noah's sudden burst of power and forced the enemy to retreat, and the other main god had already begun to fly out with all his might, he naturally would not stop. One had to admit that in terms of escaping, Cyan was extremely talented. He extended his body and instantly chased after the main god in front of him into the air. Noah was infuriated. His anger had reached its peak. Although his previous all-out attack had forced the surrounding people to retreat and blocked the attack of the Ice Phoenix, it had consumed a lot of his energy. In the previous battle, the three overgods had held back so that they would have a better chance to escape. As soon as Noah created an opportunity to escape, he wanted the other two overgods to help him, and then the three of them could escape together. However, the other two guys ran faster than the other. Obviously, they had no intention of helping him. As soon as the two escaped, Noah, who had not recovered from the consumption of energy, was one step slower. The black light, like a long rainbow, chased after Sion, who was running in the second place with a gorgeous arc normally. With the strength of the silver god Sion, it would be easy to deal with the attack of the demon-devouring blade, whether it was dodging or blocking. However, he had just been burned by the Fire Phoenix's true Phoenix fire, and the severe pain all over his body greatly affected his judgment. When he felt the dark breath of the demon-devouring blade, his body only had time to flash in the air slightly, and the demon-devouring blade swept past him. Sion screamed and suddenly accelerated, fleeing into the distance. 3 out of the 4 main gods had escaped, but Noah, the last remaining one, was not so lucky. Just as his heart was filled with rage, 2 flames with different auras ignited in the air at the same time. As his body flipped, he suddenly descended. The ice and fire phoenixes left behind a beautiful trail of flames in the air. The red and blue lights seemed to have completely fused together. The loud phoenix cry resounded through the 9 heavens, leaving behind afterimages of the phoenixes. In the distorted space, they formed a red and blue cone-shaped force that headed straight for the god of wisdom, Noah. Noah was a little panicked. At the critical moment, he had to choose to explode his acupoint. Under the encirclement of so many masters of the Rangoon continent's allied forces, he could only choose to explode his acupoints if he wanted to escape. With a thought, his psychic power triggered the Huangji acupoint in his body. Just when his acupoint was about to explode, Noah suddenly saw a faint golden light. It was an illusory light, but it was also full of the aura of death. He saw the ruthless smile on Yen Bing's face, and his brain trembled violently as if it had been hit by a giant hammer. The energy that had just condensed suddenly dispersed. The Huangji acupoint was only a little bit away from exploding, but it was just this little bit that made him unable to see the sun tomorrow. When the huge energy of the Ice Phoenix and the Fire Phoenix reached him, it had already condensed into a solid body that was only 3 meters long. The light and shadow passed through with infinite unwillingness and resentment. Noah, the god of wisdom's body, instantly stopped. The red and blue light stopped 10 meters behind him and transformed into human figures. Noah's body drifted away in a gentle breeze, leaving no trace behind. Even his spiritual brand was burned to ashes by the 2 super flames. The entire Rangoon continent's allied forces cheered thunderously. This was the first time they had killed a master of the overgod level. The success this time had tipped the scales of the war in their favor. Nian Bing's figure flashed, and she arrived in front of the red and blue figures. She hugged them tightly in her arms. When she deeply felt the bouncy and perfect bodies, she finally believed that she had not lost the love of her life. It did not matter whether the overgod was dead or not. What was more important was that the two women she loved had come back alive. What could be more wonderful than that? Luo Ro, who was commanding the army, Mu Jing, who was standing in the distance, and Kitty, who had just escaped the brink of death, all looked at the three people who were hugging each other. There was no jealousy in their eyes, only envy. Feng Nu and Lan Chen's hearts were still beating violently at this moment. Although they did not regret risking their lives for Kitty, in the depths of their hearts, how could they bear to part with Nian Bing? Now everything had become so perfect. They had not died, and they had even succeeded in killing an overgod. This was enough to change the outcome of the entire war, but it was not as wonderful as being in Nian Bing's warm embrace. When Feng Nu and Lan Chen faced the full-powered attacks of the three overgods head-on, they thought they were finished. Their 20 years of life had come to an end, and they had lost everything. Although they were unwilling, at that moment they had no other choice. The full-powered attacks of the three level 14 overgods were extremely terrifying. With the strength of the two level 13 experts, there was no suspense at all. Their bodies were turned to dust by the surging energy of the Huangji acupoint. However, just when they thought that their lives were about to end, they were surprised to find that their souls still existed. At that moment, they heard a beautiful sound at the same time. It was the sound of heartbeats. Their heartbeats were not fast, but the sound they felt had the exact same rhythm. In that beautiful melody, they suddenly realized something. Suddenly, they discovered that their souls had begun to burn. As soon as this happened, Phoenix Maiden and Lan Chen thought that their souls were about to dissipate. However, as the invisible flame became more and more intense, they were surprised to find that the heartbeat in the depths of their souls became more and more violent. Their souls were also burning in the scorching soul fire in this throbbing heartbeat. They were becoming more and more powerful. Their soul fire went from formless to tangible. Their souls that had inherited the royal bloodline of the phoenixes had reached a whole new level as they burned. When the red and blue flames appeared out of nowhere and scared off the three overgods, the three overgods were all stunned. Feng Nu and Lan Chen suddenly understood. That moving heartbeat was coming from the heart of the phoenix. They finally understood why they had been unable to comprehend the true essence of the heart of the phoenix and reach the 9th transformation of the phoenix, becoming a true phoenix. It was because they had not gone through the process that a phoenix had to go through. That was the process of a phoenix's rebirth. Only by going through the process of rebirth could one truly transform from a human body into a phoenix's true form and achieve the highest ability that their ancestors possessed. This surprise attack came quickly and ended quickly as well. From Kitty's discovery of the 4 overgods to Noah's destruction, it only took a few minutes. The allied army of the Sunshine Continent, which had almost lost 3 level 13 experts in the surprise attack, had completely changed because of the sudden transformation of the 2 phoenixes. Other than Yen Bing, who was slightly injured, the allied army of the Sunshine Continent did not suffer any substantial losses. However, the 4 overgods who came to the surprise attack were either severely injured or dead. Such a result was not only unexpected by Nian Bing, but also by the overgods, Shi Jie. When the 3 fleeing overgods returned to the army of gods, Shi Jie had just woken up from his cultivation state. Tyrant god Wang Qi's miserable state really shocked him. Wang Qi was the first to return. He had no choice but to explode his west meridian point. Even so, his spiritual energy was still severely injured by Nian Bing. In his grief and indignation, Nian Bing's spiritual energy went all out. Although Wang Qi had a divine weapon to protect his body and used his west meridian point to explode in exchange for a large amount of Xiantian Qi to protect his spiritual domain, Nian Bing's physical spiritual energy attack was too overbearing. Wang Qi barely managed to return to Shi Jie's side. Jiu immediately fell into a coma. Shi Jie checked his body and found that Wang Qi did not suffer any injuries due to the excessive use of women. However, his spiritual energy was in complete chaos. What was even more frightening was that his soul seemed to have suffered heavy injuries. Although his Huangji point, Diling point, and Lizhong point were still intact, he had completely entered a state of deep sleep in order to recover his soul. As for how long he would be in deep sleep, even Shi Jie did not know. Shi Jie's heart could not help but tighten when Wang Qi suffered such injuries. He did not need to ask to know who had done this. When he thought about the other 3 overgods, he could not help but frown deeply. His eyes shone with a sinister light. He also wanted to save the other 3 overgods. After all, the overgods' positions in the army of gods were too important. They were the absolute backbone of the army. However, he did not leave his cultivation cave. Only 2 days had passed since the start of the first battle. Shi Jie's injuries had only recovered by less than 50%. Not to mention tyrant god Wang Qi, even the weakest of the 5 overgods, the silver god Xian, was slightly stronger than him. On that day, although he appeared to be very impressive in the battle, how could he not pay a price for killing the dragon god? The dragon god's strength might not be as strong as tyrant god Wang Qi, but he had the innate advantage of dragons. The body of a dragon and the draconic magic had caused a lot of problems for Shi Jie. It had greatly overdrawn his combat power. However, this was not the real reason why he had suffered such heavy injuries. The real reason for the slow recovery of the Shi realm's strength was mainly due to the 2 spells that Suo Xiong had resolved. Furthermore, the super spells launched by thousands of mages from the Huarong Empire under the leadership of Prince Rong and several archmages had brought great pressure to the Shi realm. After resolving that super large-scale spell, Suo Xiong and Suo Xiong didn't even have time to catch their breath before they had to deal with another Ice Lotus spell launched by hundreds of Ice Element mages from the Ice Celestial Tower. If it were any other time, a single level 14 spell would not pose any threat to the Shi world. However, after dealing with these 2 spells in succession and then fighting a battle with the dragon god, his incomparably strong body could no longer bear it. Fire and ice were 2 types of limit. Although Shi Jie was the king of the main gods, he was not as weak as Shi Jie. When the dragon god died in battle and wanted to resolve it, these 2 types of magic had already caused great damage to his body. If Ying Wei had not felt that he would not be able to withstand this kind of damage, he would not have been able to withstand it. Why would Shi Jie order the gods to retreat? After returning to this place, he immediately began to cultivate in seclusion. During these 2 days, he had been fighting against the ice and fire abilities. However, it was not an easy task. It was precisely because of this reason that Shi Jie did not follow the other 4 overgods to launch a sneak attack on the allied forces of the Rangoon continent. In his plan, the 4 overgods would weaken the strength of many parties to a certain extent and even kill the young man who was the spiritual leader of the allied forces of the Rangoon continent. Once his strength was fully recovered, he would be able to kill Shi Jie. Once he had fully recovered, it would be impossible for the Rangoon continent's allied forces to block the attacks of the gods. The plan was perfect, but changes kept happening. When Shi Jie used his combat energy to help Wang Ji stop the bleeding and sealed his damaged acupuncture points so that the innate qi would not leak out, the other 2 main gods had returned. Although the 2 of them looked better than Wang Ji, they were not much better off. This was especially so for the silver god Shan. His lower body was covered in blood and his spirit was exhausted. When the 2 of them finally returned, Shi Jie's breath was unstable as he shouted angrily, "What happened? How did you guys end up like this? Where's Noah? Where did Noah go?" Shan looked at Shi Jie with a pale face. He now had the urge to cry. His acupuncture points did not explode and his strength did not suffer much damage. However, when Emperor Kurobutsu stabbed him before he left, he fell into an abyss of pain. In everyone's eyes, the silver god should be called the god of lust. However, Emperor Kurobutsu's slash in the air had accidentally cut off the thing he was most proud of. The physical pain was far less than the mental blow. Shan was a person who could not stand loneliness. One of the main reasons he was able to stay on the continent of gods for so many years was because of the female god. However, now he had lost the most fundamental thing of a man. Other than the deep resentment in his heart, there was only endless pain. Noah is dead. I'm also injured. Those humans from the Yangon continent are too scary. Noah was killed by the two phoenixes in order to protect us. If we didn't run fast enough, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to return. The injury on his lower body had been sealed by his combat energy and was no longer bleeding. However, Shan's heart was bleeding at this moment. Faced with Shi Jie's accusation, he endured the pain in his heart and gave a simple account of the battle. After listening to Shan's account, even someone as strong as Shi Jie could not help but gasp. When they first stepped into the Lost Continent, they had a total of 6 main gods. At that time, if the dragon god was included, they had a total of 6 main gods. However, the current situation had completely changed. Due to the complete awakening of the two phoenixes, the other side now had at least 5 or 6 powerhouses of the 14th step and above. Their numbers were actually more than their own side. Could this battle still continue? On their side, even if the half-dead tyrant god Wang Qi was included, they only had 4 main gods. Although they were confident that they were at least equivalent to 2 to 3 level 14 powerhouses, the war had progressed to this stage. Even if the gods could win in the end, they would have to pay a huge price. Shi Jie was somewhat silent. He did not blame Shan and the others. He told them to go back and rest. Even if he wanted to send these master gods out, he couldn't really do it. Now, the true gods could only rely on them. From the moment they entered the Lost Continent until now, everything that had happened was not as good as they had expected. Not only did they not manage to kill the refugees of the Lost Continent, they even lost a large number of true gods. Thinking of this, Shi Jie's brain could not help but work quickly. After a short period of thinking, he had made a decision. Since they had already arrived at the Lost Continent, they could not retreat before they won. Otherwise, the gods would not have the chance to touch the Lost Continent and Yangon Continent. After all, the other side had a large number of people. As long as the godly mainland existed, they would always be vigilant. They might even cultivate more powerhouses and sharp weapons to deal with the godly mainland. If he led the gods to retreat, it was very likely that these Rangoon continent's powerhouses would kill their way to the godly mainland in the near future. Up until now, the strength of both sides had changed from the advantage of the gods to a balance. No one could be sure that they would win in the end. Since that was the case, under the situation where they did not lack water and food, they could only wait for a while and make plans after they had recovered. At this time, Shi Jie had another idea. However, he needed to fully recover his strength before he could carry it out. The feeling of going from sadness to joy was the most wonderful. Before the war began, or more accurately, after arriving at the Lost Continent, Nian Bing tried his best to avoid being together with his wives. This was because he wanted to set an example for his subordinates in the Bloodlion sect. He did not want others to see him slacking off because of his personal affairs. Therefore, in these few months, even if he was intimate with his wives, he did it secretly. Even though the Rangoon continent's allied forces knew that there was a powerful young powerhouse on their side, they did not know that the 2 Phoenix beauties were his wives. Chapter 246. Nian Bing's name had spread throughout the alliance since the beginning of the war. Now, everyone in the alliance knew that the strongest person in Rangoon was no longer the ice goddess priestess, nor was it Prince Rong. It was this young man who looked to be in his 20s. They had all witnessed the strength of the over-gods. Today, Nian Bing had single-handedly injured one of the over-gods and forced him to flee. It was also with his help that the 2 phoenixes killed the other over-god. For a time, the names of these 3 people spread throughout the alliance of Rangoon. Some people vaguely knew that Nian Bing was the magic genius who won the 5 Nations New Magician competition. However, as for his information and experience, ordinary soldiers didn't know much. Only the absolute leaders of the four empires knew a little about him. After repelling the sneak attack of the overgods, Nian Bing no longer had any reservations. After returning Kaka back to his body, he directly returned to his own tent with Feng Nu and Lan Chun. The overgods had been repelled, so they couldn't come back. What Nian Bing wanted to do now was to be with his wives. Halogen, Kitty, Bing Jie, and Bing Ling took the initiative to take on the task of patrolling. The 7 Dragon Kings didn't participate in the previous battle because the dragons were stationed in the other direction of the alliance of Rangoon. Except for the Fire Dragon King, Garamambian, all 7 Dragon Kings also came to the human alliance at this time. The Dark Dragon King, Kitiosis, took the lead to investigate the movement of the gods. Seeing that the gods didn't intend to attack again, the alliance of Rangoon retreated to rest. The tent fell into silence. Nian Bing looked at Feng Nu and Lan Chun. They were also looking at him. Do you know how scared I was? At that moment, I thought I would lose you forever. Nian Bing held the 2 women's hands tightly. His eyes were already red. Although his chest was throbbing with pain, and his spiritual energy had been greatly weakened by the 2 attacks, he couldn't care less about his own body. He only wanted to look at the 2 women he loved so much that he couldn't wait to become one with them. Feng Nu whispered, Bing, you should know. At that time we had no choice. We can't bear to leave you either. But how can we let Kitty get hurt? If it were you, you would definitely do the same. If we only selfishly act for ourselves, then what is the difference between us and the gods? The heavens are magnanimous. If it weren't for what happened today, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to see through the 9 transformations of the phoenix. At least we would still be alive. This time, the gods' side had suffered a great loss while their side's strength had increased. This battle was about to become a possibility. Nian Bing, you're injured. Hurry up and cultivate. You are the leader of our experts. Your Sky Eye Realm and your 7 Blade Souls are our main force. You cannot afford to make any mistakes. Lan Chun leaned her head on Nian Bing's shoulder and said gently, Sister is right. You should rest well. We still have a long way to go. Now we have almost 7 experts above the 14th level. You, my sister and I, Senior Emperor Kurobutsu, Dark Dragon King Katiriosis, my master and brother Halogen. Although we have just entered the 14th level, we have an absolute advantage in terms of numbers when it's 7 against 4. No matter how strong the She-World is, at the very least we can fight to a draw. Bing. Hurry up and rest. My sister and I will leave first. It's not good for Ling, that you brought us back without bringing her along. After hearing Lan Chen's words, Nian Bing was slightly shocked. That's right. I only brought Feng Nu and Lan Chun back because I was too excited and neglected my other wife. It's unfair to Long Ling. Ever since I established my relationship with the 3 ladies, I've already had relations with Lan Chun and Feng Nu. To a certain extent, I've neglected Long Ling. Although Long Ling never said anything, Nian Bing couldn't help but feel guilty when she thought about it now. Just as Feng Nu and Lan Chun were about to leave, the tent's curtains suddenly opened. Long Ling walked in with a smile on her face. She was holding a big tray full of food. Once she saw Feng Nu and Lan Chun, she let out a long breath and smiled. You scared me to death. If you leave like this, what will Nian Bing and I do? Ling or I? Nian Bing quickly stood up and took the tray from Long Ling's hands. Long Ling smiled faintly and raised her hand to cover Nian Bing's mouth. Okay, don't say anything. I understand. Come, it's very late now. Let's eat something first. Feeling Long Ling's gentleness, whether it was Nian Bing, Feng Nu, or Lan Chun, their hearts were filled with warmth. Long Ling never fought for anything and always silently stayed by their side. Even if Nian Bing neglected her, she never had any dissatisfaction. This kind of broad-minded girl was so precious. The patrolling Ice Moon Empire soldiers just happened to see the scene of Long Ling entering Nian Bing's tent. Soldier A whispered to Soldier B, "Damn, our court magician is really valiant. We just had a big battle outside and now we have to fight again. Admirable, really admirable." Soldier B said with envy, "What do you know? The two phoenixes and that magician's association's Long Ling girl are our court magician's wives. They are a veritable emperor and 3 empresses. Think about it, other than our court magician, who can match the beautiful phoenixes and our Ice Moon Empire's gentle girls?" Soldier A said, "Forget it, it's useless for us to be envious. If we also have the strength of the court magician, maybe there will be beauties throwing themselves at us." Soldier B glanced at Soldier A and said, "Well, this wish of yours will definitely come true. I have a premonition." Soldier A was overjoyed. "Is that so? So you can also see that I am not immortal. Those gods are nothing. I think our court magician is the real god, no matter in which aspect." "Oh, you said you have a premonition, then when can I become as strong as the court magician?" Soldier B said in a deep voice, "Soon, very soon." Soldier A's eyes began to twinkle. "What is soon?" "Brother, I found that you really have good eyesight. You can be more specific. I didn't expect you to be a fortune teller." Soldier B looked at him deeply. "I am not a fortune teller," he said solemnly. "I am not a fortune teller. I am just deducing based on the facts. Your wish will definitely come true." Soldier A couldn't believe it this time. "Really? Where can I fulfill my wish?" Soldier B smiled and said, "After tonight's patrol. As for the place to fulfill your wish, I can think of it with my toes." Soldier A looked at Soldier B in surprise. "So your toes are so powerful. Don't keep me in suspense, tell me quickly." Soldier B nodded and said, "It's very simple. In a dream." Soldier A was stunned for a moment, then his eyes spat fire. He turned to Soldier B and said angrily, "F***CK." Just as Soldier B expected, after patrolling that night, Soldier A realized his wish in his dream, and the same thing happened to Soldier B. There were a lot of people in the Yangon army. After all, to become a peerless expert was almost everyone's wish. In a harmonious atmosphere, the 4 people finished the supper. Although the food in the army was certainly not comparable to Nian Bing's food, it was delicious. However, the food they ate was exceptionally fragrant and sweet. There was not a single bit left over. When the supper was finished, Long Ling was preparing to leave with Feng Nu and Lan Chen, but the 2 girls forced her to stay. They gave Nian Bing a strange look and turned away. Long Ling looked at Feng Nu and Lan Chen's tent after they left. She couldn't help but be a little stunned. She had vaguely guessed something, and her face couldn't help but become hotter and hotter. But there was a trace of expectation in her heart. 2 strong arms gently wrapped around Long Ling's waist. That soft body had a faint fragrance. Long Ling's body softened, and she subconsciously leaned into the wide embrace behind her. Nian Bing lowered her head, leaning on Long Ling's shoulder, and whispered to her red little ears, "Linger, you smell so good." Long Ling whispered, "Don't be like this. You're injured, you need to rest and recuperate." Nian Bing chuckled, "My injury isn't serious, and it doesn't seem to affect me from doing what I need to do." Ling, tell me honestly, have you been angry with me these past few days?" Long Ling shook her head without hesitation and said, "No, never. Didn't you neglect Feng Nu and Lan Chen a lot these days? We all understand that you have important business to attend to. Nothing is more important than this battle of ascension. As long as we can defeat these gods, we still have a long, long future ahead of us. I just want to do something to help you, and that's enough." Bing, do you still remember that night when we slept together in the capital of the Huarong Empire? That day you expressed your feelings to us, and it was from that day onwards that I understood that you really love me. To me, that's enough. The love I give is not unrequited. I'm not as beautiful as Chun Chen and Feng Nu, and I've always been a little worried. But in your heart, you might love them a little more, but your love for me is no less. It's just that because of some special reasons we don't communicate much with each other. Ling you're so good. At this time, Nian Bing didn't know what words to use to praise this gentle and lovely wife of his. He only wanted to use the most gentle way to love this woman who has always loved him deeply. He now felt that his original decision was so correct. This was indeed a girl worthy of his love. Although she wasn't as beautiful as Feng Nu and Lan Chun, but she also had a gentleness and care that Feng Nu and Lan Chun couldn't compare to. Her love for him was always so firm, and he could only use a lifetime of love to repay her. Feeling the increasing heat from Nian Bing's body, Long Ling's heart seemed to melt. Her delicate body trembled with excitement and some nervousness. She slowly turned around in Nian Bing's embrace and looked up at Nian Bing's handsome face. She whispered, "Nian Bing, love me. Ling is already yours. Now let me give my everything to you." After receiving Long Ling's permission, Nian Bing no longer had any scruples. When she finished speaking, Nian Bing had already lowered his head and kissed her soft and moist lips deeply. At this time, it was already late at night. The faint smell of spring gradually thickened in Nian Bing's tent. He didn't need to worry about anyone hearing the movements in the tent. A simple magic seal isolated the tent from the rest of the world. His mental strength easily blocked Oscar's perception of the outside world. Even the best of brothers wouldn't want a bystander at this time. Oscar couldn't help but feel a little depressed when he sensed that he had been isolated by Nian Bing's mental power. Every time he was allowed to watch a little foreplay, he would be cut off from the rest of the world. Once he became stronger, he would definitely be able to woo a beautiful dragon girl from the dragon tribe. He was a handsome and elegant little dragon king, so there would definitely be a lot of dragon girls who would like him. When he thought of this, his mental state immediately became much more balanced. Nian Bing naturally didn't know what Oscar was thinking. He also didn't have the mood to think about other things now. The clothes on their bodies continued to decrease. Nian Bing carefully picked up Long Ling and placed her on his bed. He cherished that white and perfect delicate body. The oil lamp in the tent went out. The first time he had sex with Lan Chun, the two of them didn't leave too deep a memory under the effect of the drug. Nian Bing only remembered that it was incomparably crazy, and the first time with Feng Nu, because of Feng Nu's initiative, the two of them quickly entered the state. But now, facing Long Ling, it was a different feeling. Long Ling was like a shy little rabbit, nervously and strangely trembling in Nian Bing's warm arms. That pitiful and delicate appearance made Nian Bing extraordinarily gentle, and every movement became careful. He gently kissed every inch of Long Ling's white and delicate skin, gently stroking her moving body, and gradually making her somewhat cold, delicate body hot. Afraid of causing even the slightest harm to Long Ling, Nian Bing resisted his impulse and tried his best to tease his gentle Ling. Under Nian Bing's not very skilled, but extremely gentle and careful teasing, Long Ling's heart gradually relaxed, and her light moans gradually became louder, and her breathing became more rapid. When the two of them finally completely merged into one, because Nian Bing deliberately used innate qi and light magic to protect Long Ling's delicate body, she could feel very little pain, and the soreness in her lower body brought her unusual fullness. With the continuous rise of lust, Nian Bing finally couldn't hold back the excitement in his heart, and his moans became louder and louder. In the gradually intensifying sprint, they rushed to the peak together. Although this was Long Ling's first time, under Nian Bing's deliberate care, her shy heart was completely opened, and everything became so beautiful. The pleasure that she had never experienced before was like a wave, bringing her to the peak of desire time and time again. The complete fusion of spirit and desire made her completely feel that she already belonged to the man she loved the most, and in this intense pleasure, her heart was even closer to Nian Bing. The two of them lingered from late at night until dawn. Although Nian Bing released the essence of life 3 times, he couldn't stop whenever he touched the delicate skin that he loved so much. Long Ling's shyness at the beginning continued to the later part, and when the peak of the 5th wave came, they finally entered that wonderful world at the same time. 10 days later. The mainland of gods. Shi Jie once again knelt respectfully at the entrance of the canyon, waiting in silence. His heart was filled with apprehension and anticipation, and even his breathing became especially careful. After waiting for an unknown amount of time, a gentle voice that couldn't be distinguished between a man and a woman sounded from the depths of the canyon. Shi Jie, why are you here again? At this time, you shouldn't be here with us, right? Your disturbance has forced us to stop our training. You should know how serious this is. Shi Jie said in fear. Honorable God of Time, I have no choice but to come and ask for help from the masses. The God of Time was a little surprised. What? Could it be that you have encountered some trouble again? With the remaining Order refugees from the Lost Continent, could they still pose a threat to you? Apart from us true gods, who else in this world can pose a threat to you? Shi Jie took a deep breath. He also didn't want to come here and face the true gods again. After all, being defeated by the humans from the Yangon mainland was an absolute humiliation to the true gods. However, he had no choice but to come. After carefully measuring the strength of the allied forces from the Yangon mainland, he couldn't help but worry about the near balance of strength. There were only so many true gods. On the other hand, there were tens of thousands of humans on the Yangon mainland. If both parties continued to fight in a war of attrition, it would definitely be disadvantageous to his side. Even if he could destroy the allied forces of the humans and reach the Yangon mainland in the end, he was afraid that he wouldn't have enough manpower to control the entire mainland. Therefore, when he had just recovered from his injuries, he used his own strength to directly travel through space and return to the godly mainland. Back then, the true gods had helped the true gods to destroy the combat power of the Lost Continent and even the entire civilization of the Lost Continent. This time, he also hoped that such a situation could happen again. As long as the true gods were willing to help, the allied forces of the Yangon mainland would be like ants. They could completely solve the current problem without wasting any true gods. No, honorable God of Time. It's not the Lost Continent that's causing me trouble, but the Yangon mainland. The Yangon mainland is far more powerful than I thought. The number of true gods they have is actually less than the number of true gods. Moreover, they have ambushed us in the Lost Continent. When we just entered the Lost Continent, we were ambushed by them and suffered heavy losses. The dragons have also defected to their side. Now, our advantage no longer exists. In a situation where both sides are evenly matched, they have an absolute advantage in terms of numbers. This is very disadvantageous for us. Therefore, I want to ask the true gods to help us and let those lowly humans know the punishment for blasphemy against the god. The God of Time was silent for a while. She whirled, you have disappointed us. Although I didn't see the situation during the battle, the true god's arrogance and selfishness are the biggest reasons for your defeat in the battle against the humans of the Yangon mainland. If you had been careful in everything you did after arriving at the Lost Continent, how could you have been ambushed by them? The dragons have always been at odds with you true gods. You should know very well that this is the result of your own actions. This time, we won't help you anymore. You have to bear the consequences of your own actions. Whether true gods have a way out in the future is all up to you. It has nothing to do with us. We still have important things to do, so we don't have the time to care about your business. If you think that this is impossible, you can retreat to the godly mainland. But, honorable God of Time, are the three of you going to watch us lose this war? If we don't win this time, I'm afraid that in the future. She whirled couldn't help but feel anxious. There was no change in the God of Time's tone. No buts. I've said it before. You true gods have to bear the consequences of your own mistakes. Alright, you can go now. We need to cultivate. She whirled wanted to say something, but he held himself back. Among the true gods, he was the most familiar with the three true gods. True gods always meant what they said. Since the God of Time had expressed that he wouldn't help him, It meant that this was a joint decision of the three true gods. This time, it seemed that the true gods could only rely on their own strength. Initially, we helped the true gods deal with the lost continent because it was beneficial to us. However, this is no longer important to us. As long as we defeat the god of emotions, we will leave this world. Whether the Yangon mainland is controlled by those countries or the true gods, it has nothing to do with us. Perhaps we will never return to this world in the future. As she whirled left, three figures slowly emerged from the illusion. The one who spoke was the leader of the three true gods, the god of order. The god of destruction snorted. These true gods are just tools for us to use. Now that they have no value, who cares if they live or die? Time is extremely precious to us. Help them? If this short delay causes us to lose the necessary time to cultivate the strength to deal with the god of emotions, then the loss outweighs the gain. The god of time sighed and said, "In my opinion, the situation of these gods is not good. Since the Yangon continent dares to fight against them, the Yangon continent must be in trouble. Since the Yangon mainland dared to fight against them, they naturally have the strength to fight against them. I didn't expect that there would be so many strong true gods in that peaceful land. Even She-World had to ask for our help. Alright, let's go back. This is the final stage of cultivation." The god of order smiled and said, "Time, I realized that you are indeed the wisest among the three of us. All this time, our efforts have not been in vain. Our cooperation and strength fusion have reached the final step. This time, I have a premonition that perhaps, in these few days, we will be able to make another breakthrough. Our Trinity combat technique will soon reach the perfect state of the unity of heaven and man." The god of time smiled. "Yes. Even I didn't expect to achieve such perfect results so quickly. It seems that your mentality has changed a lot. This is the solid foundation we laid for the final victory of the father of science and technology and the father of human evolution. What Destruction said was right. We can't waste even a minute. Do you still remember the premonition I mentioned last time? Now, this premonition has become stronger. We are improving, but so are the true gods of emotions, Cao and Tian Xiang. If we want to truly destroy them, we must put in all our effort." The three figures disappeared into the illusion again. The atmosphere on the continent of gods seemed to have become more solemn. The lost continent, the camp of the Rangoon Alliance army. The entire camp was carrying out simple training in an orderly manner. Although this kind of training didn't have much effect on improving the strength of the soldiers of the four empires, it could boost their morale. This was because during their daily training, Nian Bing and other strong people would be watching them. The gaze of strong people gave the soldiers incomparable confidence. A few days ago, good news came again. The reinforcements of the four empires had arrived. Because they felt the threat that the gods could bring to the Rangoon continent, and the importance of the lost continent for the future development of the four empires, this time, the four empires sent a large number of elite troops, adding another 200,000 soldiers to the original four empires' army. At the same time, the Duke of Bluefeather and his wife of the Ottoman Empire arrived in time, and brought the most elite troops of the Ottoman Empire, the Silver Feather Knights. Because of the destruction of the Order of the Flaming Lion and the Order of the Fire Dragon, the Hwarong Empire's strength was greatly reduced. Now, except for the troops stationed at the border, the Ottoman Empire's elite troops were all in the lost continent. Luo Ro's judgment was very correct. If the Ottoman Empire wanted to develop better, they had to do two things. First, it was to have a good relationship with the Ice Moon Empire. Not only because of the friendship between the Ottoman Empire and the Ice Moon Empire, but also because the Ice Moon Empire's army was led by Nian Bing this time. The Ice Moon Empire also built the first freshwater lake on the lost continent. Combining these factors, the Ottoman Empire must always maintain a good relationship with the Ice Moon Empire. The other was to play an important role in this war and obtain the most needed territory on the lost continent. The Ottoman Empire's territory was mainly hills, mountains, and plateaus. Therefore, they were greatly behind in terms of agriculture. A country's wealth had a great impact on its strength. Therefore, they needed to fight for more plains in the new land of the lost continent. Of course, Luo Ro knew that Nian Bing had a special relationship with the Longmu Empire and Huarong Empire. Therefore, she sent a large number of craftsmen to the lost continent at the very beginning to reclaim the land. The sky-shaking mountain range was in the Ottoman Empire's territory, which gave them a great advantage. Now that they were guarding the important pass from the Yangon continent to the lost continent together with the Ice Moon Empire, they already had a certain advantage in the future development of the lost continent. The Longmu Empire and Huarong Empire naturally did not want to fall behind. When they sent their armies, they also brought a large number of resources and various tools. Although it was not yet time for them to carve out their own territories on the lost continent, it was better to prepare for a rainy day than to sharpen one's spear at the last minute. The royal families of the four empires were not fools. In this kind of crucial moment, they were very clear on what to do. The 1,000 mages of the Huarong Empire had basically recovered their battle strength. Even Prince Rong, who had almost lost his life due to his age and injuries, had recovered 80% of his strength with Nian Bing's help. However, the fall of the two knight regiments was a heavy blow to this great military commander of the Yangon continent. His original ambition had become somewhat disheartened. During the conversation with Nian Bing, Prince Rong told Nian Bing that after the Battle of Yangshan, he would return to the Huarong Empire to retire. He would hand over the Rong family to his eldest son, Rong Yu, and remind Nian Bing not to forget what she had promised him. Prince Rong did not know how lucky he was to have made that choice. Now, as long as Nian Bing was there, on the Yangon continent, no one would dare to have any ideas about the Rong family. Even the royal family of the Huarong Empire would not take the risk to make things difficult for the Rong family. The strength of the Rong family, coupled with the super-expert Nian Bing, was something that anyone would have to consider carefully. The daily routine meeting of the four empires was held in the morning. The representatives of the four empires were Mu Jing and Mu Rong from the Longmu Empire. Mu Rong led the supply army to the front line this time for two reasons. One was to assist his sister, and the other was to gain more merit in the expansion of the lost continent. This way, the next emperor of the Longmu Empire would not be changed. The representatives of the Ottoman Empire were Luo Ro and Duchess Bluefeather. The representatives of the Ice Moon Empire were still Marshal Snow Soul and Nian Bing. The representatives of the Huarong Empire were the two brothers, Rong Yu and Rong Tian. Due to the strength that Nian Bing displayed in this war, as well as the strength that she controlled, Rong Tian's father rose because of his son. Although he had just returned to the Rong family, his status in the Rong family had skyrocketed. His son was a super expert, and the weakest of his 3 daughters-in-law was a magister. His wife was the ice goddess priestess of the Ice God Tower. With such a combination of strength, no one dared to look down on Rong Tian. In front of strength, no one in the Rong family dared to say anything against Rong Tian. He had directly entered the upper echelons of the Rong family. His twin brother, Rong Yu, was also in the Rong family. In just a short 10 days, Rong Tian had jumped to the upper echelons of the Rong family, second only to Prince Rong and Rong Yu. Although he didn't have any Rong family disciples under him, he belonged to the faction of his brother, Rong Yu, and had the strength of a magister. Chapter 247. During the meeting, the first to speak was Rong Yu. After all, the Huarong Empire was the most powerful empire in the Yangon continent. According to the 7 Dragon King's scouts, the gods still haven't made any moves. Now, more than 10 days have passed, and we've basically replenished our strength. Should we let the gods run out of food and water, and then take the initiative to attack? It wasn't that Rong Yu was overconfident. After analyzing the situation, the conclusion he came to was very simple. In the battle between the top masters, the allied forces of the Rangoon continent weren't at a disadvantage. As for the demigod gods on the other side, they could rely on the large number of magicians on the side of the Rangoon continent to make up for their disadvantage. In addition to the god-killing crossbows and a large number of troops, they might suffer some losses, but they still had a chance to wipe out the god. Although the Yangon Empire's army had a steady supply of supplies, there were more than 300,000 soldiers gathered here. The consumption of supplies was astonishing, and they couldn't continue like this. Rong Yu's voice fell, and everyone's eyes focused on Luo Ro. In the Battle of Yangon, Luo Ro's wisdom in commanding troops was obvious to all. She had long since become the military advisor of the Yangon Empire. All military operations were under her command, including the deployment of troops. Because of the existence of the gods, the alliance was unprecedentedly united. Luo Ro nodded with a smile and said, "Maybe it's time for us to take action. The gods haven't done anything for the past few days. One of the reasons is the same as ours, which is to recover their strength and regroup. Another reason is that they now have food and water. It's time to run out of food and water. However, we don't need to take the initiative to attack. We have been stationed here for a few days. There's no better place to fight than here. If we take the initiative to attack, we'll have to redeploy. If the gods set an ambush, it will greatly increase our losses. If we stay here and threaten to run out of food and water, the gods can only attack us. This way, our god-killing crossbows and magicians will be able to deal the most damage. That way, you can deal the greatest amount of damage to your opponent." At this point, a charming smile appeared on Luo Ro's charming face. At this point, the gods only have 3 choices. First, they have no other choice. That is to fight us head-on. Based on our current arrangements, we have at least a 60% chance of victory in a head-on battle. However, it's possible for the enemy's experts to flee in the end. The enemy's overgods and god-ranked experts are all extremely powerful. If they insist on fleeing, there's nothing we can do. He could only think of a way to kill it in the future. Secondly, due to the lack of food and water, the other party may disperse their forces to infiltrate the Yangon continent. This is obviously a bad idea for them. We also have a large number of troops at the border between the Lost Continent and the Yangon continent, with Frozen Moon Lake as the center. With a large number of troops stationed here, if they dared to disperse, our experts would be able to concentrate their superior forces. During the chase, they would gradually erode the opponent's strength. With the help of the dragons, this was completely achievable. The last possibility was that the gods had run out of food and water and were forced to retreat to the continent of gods. As the saying goes, a defeated army is like a landslide. As long as they retreat, their morale will be reduced to nothing. We just have to chase them down and chase them back to the continent of gods. Then, the final victory of this war will belong to us. At that time, we will be able to build a solid defensive line between the Lost Continent and the Gods' Continent. The Gods' Continent is just a small place, and under the situation where our experts are not weaker than the other side, as long as we trap them there, one day we will be able to completely destroy them. The scales of victory have already tipped in our favor. In a sense, we are the righteous side. Victory will belong to us. Although the strength of both sides is almost equal, we have many advantages that the enemy does not. Therefore, in the final battle, what we need to do is to minimize our losses as much as possible and completely eliminate the threat of the god. Luo Ro's analysis was unanimously approved by the leaders of the 4 nations. At the same time, the food and water shortage operation began. The Yangon Continent's alliance also began to move, preparing for the most crucial battle of the War of Gods. Perhaps it would also be the final battle. After the meeting, Nian Bing wanted to look around and help Luo Ro with some work, but he was stopped by Duke Bluefeather. Nian Bing didn't dare to neglect his father-in-law. As soon as he heard Duke Bluefeather calling for him, He hurriedly followed the Ottoman Empire's #1 military officer out of the tent. "Your Excellency, what business do you have with me?" Nian Bing asked as he followed behind Duke Bluefeather. Duke Bluefeather said expressionlessly, "I've been here for a few days now, but I still haven't had a chance to talk to you. You brat, good job. You kidnapped my 2 daughters in one go." Nian Bing said carefully, "Your Excellency, I don't think you can describe it as kidnapping. Feng Nu, Chen Chen, and I are truly in love. I will love them for the rest of my life." Duke Bluefeather waved his hand. "You don't need to say such things to me. I've heard such words many times, but whether you can do it or not depends on your actions." Hearing Duke Bluefeather's words, Nian Bing felt relieved. Although the Duke's tone wasn't very good, at least he admitted his relationship with Feng Nu and Lan Chen. "Your Excellency, I will prove it to you with my actions." Duke Bluefeather sighed. "Frankly speaking, from a talent point of view, you are almost impeccable. The first time I saw you, I was surprised by your talent. You're so young yet you're already so strong. Moreover, you're a magus of the same origin as ice and fire. At that time, I knew you were not a fish in a pond. There will be a day when you shine brightly. It's only been a few years since we first met, but you've changed so much. A few years is not a short time for ordinary people, but for us cultivators, whether it's a warrior or a magus, it's not a long time. Everyone's strength will increase after a few years, but for someone like you to reach such a terrifying realm, I'm afraid it's unprecedented." Nian Bing blushed with shame. "Maybe it's because my luck is good. Under several coincidences, I managed to break through several realms and reach my current strength." Duke Bluefeather shook his head again. He turned around and glanced at Nian Bing. At this moment, there was already a slight smile on his face. "Opportunities are important, but whether or not you can seize them depends on your own abilities. Strength is based on 90% hard work and 10% luck. Luck is what you call opportunity. If you grasp it well, it may bring about a qualitative change. But without hard work as a foundation, even if the opportunity comes, you won't be able to grasp it. Ru Yen has already done an excellent job in this aspect. I never thought anyone could surpass her in this aspect, but you did it. Therefore, when it comes to cultivation, you can be said to be one of the few people I admire. You don't have to be so modest, I'm speaking from the bottom of my heart." Listening to Duke Bluefeather's praise, Nian Bing didn't respond. She always felt that Duke Bluefeather must have something else to say. Otherwise, he wouldn't have deliberately called her out. Sure enough, after praising Nian Bing, Duke Bluefeather suddenly changed the topic, coldly saying, "Although I admire you in terms of strength, I hate people like you when it comes to handling emotions. You should know what happened between me and Ru Yen. Ever since I had Ru Yen, I haven't had an abnormal relationship with any other woman. I've always believed that love needs to be single-minded. Only a single-minded love can be perfect. You say you love my 2 daughters, then what if I ask you, who do you love more? Which of them do you love more? How will you answer me? Can you answer?" Duke Bluefeather's voice wasn't loud, but there was a hint of anger in it. Nian Bing shook his head. "I can't answer." Duke Bluefeather glanced at Nian Bing. At this time, they had already left the camp and arrived at the small lake that originally belonged to the survivors of the lost continent. Duke Bluefeather stopped and continued, "Yes, you can't answer. A person only has one heart and a fixed amount of love. If you give all your love to one woman, then that is true love. But what about you now? Your love is divided into 3 parts, is this fair to your women? They can't get all your love. Let's put it another way, if the woman you love has 2 other men, can you accept it?" Nian Bing smiled bitterly. "I can't accept it. If such a situation really happens, I'm afraid I'll destroy my love rival at any cost." "Duke, I understand what you mean, but it has already happened. To be honest, I once had the same idea as you, to only love one woman in my life. But sometimes plans can't keep up with changes. In the past, the only one I loved was the Phoenix Maiden. You should have seen it when we were in the Duke's mansion. However, Ling also deeply loved me. Her heart was so fragile. She had been silently waiting for me. It was inevitable that I would develop feelings of love for her. It was impossible for me to abandon her. I was once in pain, but I thought it through later. Although I can't give all my love to one woman, I will do my best to give all my love to them and try my best to love each and every one of them. I'm not afraid of your anger. To be honest, even if you want to separate me from Feng Nu and Chunchen, it's impossible. I admit that I am far inferior to you in this aspect, but I love them all the same. I can't let any of them leave my side. As their man, I have the duty to protect them. Unless they are willing, no one can take them away from me. Nian Bing's every word was very firm. He didn't try to explain himself. His threatening words were definitely jarring to the ears, but he had voiced his thoughts. Bluefeather coldly stared at Nian Bing. Why don't you explain yourself to me? I know that what happened between you and Chunchen can be considered an accident. Nian Bing shook his head and said, There's nothing to explain. Since it has already happened, and the truth is right in front of us, any explanation would only be perfunctory to you. I respect you, so I don't want to be perfunctory. I'm speaking from the bottom of my heart. Perhaps you will hate me even more, but this is the only answer I can give. The frost on Bluefeather's face seemed to have thawed. He suddenly stepped forward and punched Nian Bing in the chest, causing him to take 2 steps back. This punch didn't contain any battle chi, it was purely physical strength. Nian Bing had at least 100 ways to deal with it, but he didn't. Bluefeather's punch didn't do any damage to his body, but it did stun him because he saw a mysterious smile on Bluefeather's face. Alright, don't scare him. He's right, the truth is in front of us. Besides, what's the use of your threats? I'm afraid we can't beat him even if we work together. Amidst the laughter, Yu Ruyan suddenly appeared in front of Nian Bing and Lan Yu. As Nian Bing was deep in thought due to his conversation with Lan Yu, he did not activate the probing ability of his Tian Yen acupoint. As a result, he did not discover that Yu Ruyan was nearby. Yu Ruyan walked in front of Bluefeather and took the initiative to hold his arm. Nian Bing, Bluefeather only wanted to scare you and make you more vigilant. Now that you have one, we'll reluctantly accept it. If you have a few more wives in the future, let's see if we can forgive you. Bluefeather laughed. Didn't you say we can't beat him even if we work together? So what if we can't? Nian Bing, at least you're honest. We'll let you go. However, my daughter can't be with you for no reason. When this war is over, you must personally come to my residence to marry my daughter. Do you understand? Nian Bing was overjoyed. Just as he was about to agree, he heard a gentle voice. I understand. In-laws, please don't blame Nian Bing. Nian Bing's mother and I haven't been able to take care of this child since he was young. Don't worry, when the war is over, Nian Bing's mother and I will definitely come to your residence to propose marriage as a sign of respect. Rong Tian walked over from afar. With his spiritual power, he could easily hear the conversation. The 2 handsome middle-aged men looked at each other and couldn't help but nod. Although the Hwarong Empire and the Ottoman Empire had fought many wars, when it came to the marriage of their children, these 2 middle-aged men, who were about the same age, had already forgotten about their country. Lan Yu smiled and said, Brother Rong, you won't blame me for calling your son out to reprimand him, right? Rong Tian laughed and said, Why would I? In the past, when we weren't by Nian Bing's side, there was no one to discipline him. Brother Lan helped me discipline him. I was happy to be free. Lan Yu smiled and said, Your son is so outstanding. If you really want to talk about disciplining him, I wouldn't dare. When the war is over, I will return to Aulin City to wait for Brother Rong to propose marriage. Don't make me wait too long. Rong Tian hurriedly said, I won't. Sigh, Nian Bing is actually very pitiful. When he was 6, his mother was forced to leave his side. When he was 10, I was also forced to leave his side. After so many years, this child has relied on his own strength to walk step by step. To be honest, I've really let my son down. Now that we're all reunited, it's time for me to fulfill my responsibilities as a father. Brother Lon, don't worry. I can't wait for Nian Bing and the others to get married as soon as possible so that I can enjoy being a grandfather. Lon Yu said. With Brother Rong's words, I'm relieved. I only have these 2 daughters in my life. If either of them is wronged, I won't be able to accept it. Now, it's all your son's fault. Yes, they should get married soon. It's not a bad thing for me to become a grandfather earlier. As long as we win this war, the continent will enter another era of peace. The lost continent is so big. Even if the 4 empires were to develop this continent in the future, who knows how many years it would take for that to happen. Such a vast continent. I'm afraid that without a few hundred years, it would be impossible to build a new civilization. The 4 empires have invested all their manpower and resources into this continent. Who would care about war? I'm not afraid of you laughing at me. This time, 2 of your Rong family's knight regiments were destroyed. Right now, the continent's situation is becoming more and more balanced. This is something that I want to see the most. Rong Tian laughed bitterly. Brother Lon, lower your voice. Don't let my father hear you. Otherwise, I'm afraid he'll fight you here. Lon Yu sighed and said, putting aside the conflicts between us, Prince Rong is indeed the person I admire the most. Only he can nurture 2 super knight regiments, the Blazing Lion Regiment and the Blazing Demon Dragon Regiment. Fortunately, our Ottoman Empire has Ro-Er now. Otherwise, when the Huarong Empire's army appears again, we won't be able to deal with it. As Lon Yu and Rong Tian chatted more and more enthusiastically, Yu Ruyan secretly gave Nian Bing a look. Nian Bing immediately understood and ran away after greeting Yu Ruyan. It was enough for him to have his father make decisions for him. As for Long Ling, he also wanted to marry her officially. Although Long Ji was a bit more powerful, he was still working hard for his own ideals. At the same time, he was also his first magic teacher. Whether it was for Ling or for the fact that he was once his disciple, he had to give Long Ji the necessary respect. The starvation strategy only lasted for a day before the dragon's scouts sent news that the gods had begun to move. This time, the gods chose the first of Luo Ro's 3 judgments. They formed a complete formation and headed towards the Rangoon continent's allied army. The old and young dragons had already arrived at the Rangoon continent's allied army 3 days after the first battle. They met up with the 7 dragon kings and the dragon's warriors. The ones in charge of scouting were the elites of the dragon's warriors. The fire dragon king, Garamandes, had already recovered 80% of his body. With Nian Bing's daily consolation, he had gradually accepted the fact that his father had died. However, the death of the dragon god had also created a huge hatred between the gods and the dragons. As soon as they received news of the gods' movements, all the dragon's warriors had already risen into the air under the leadership of the 7 Dragon King, waiting for the enemy's arrival. The Rangoon continent's allied army's formation was arranged in order. In order to deal with the gods' possible surprise attack, the Rangoon continent's allied army was divided into small square formations with 10,000 people as a unit. They were neatly spread out in the central area and the surrounding hills. The god-killing crossbow army had been reassembled. The ones in charge of using this destructive weapon were still the elites of the Blood Lion sect. After a short period of training, the Dwarf King Halogen had made the Blood Lion sect's elites quickly grasped how to use the god-killing crossbow. At this moment they were at a commanding height. All the god-killing crossbows were loaded and ready to fire at any time. Surrounded by the human army, the magician army was in the center of the allied army. They were personally led by Prince Rong and the new generation of Ice Goddess Priestess Bing Ling. They had already begun to prepare their magic. The war was about to break out. What they were waiting for now was the arrival of the gods. The gods' movements were forced. When Shi Jie found out that he had suddenly run out of food and water, no matter how stupid he was, he knew that all of this was the doing of the Rangoon continent's allied army. At this time, he knew that he had no way out. To the gods, this was not only an important battle, but it could also be their last battle. If they won, they would be able to directly invade the Rangoon continent. If they lost, the gods would perish. This time, Shi Jie dared not be careless. He flew at the forefront of the gods' army and fully activated the ultimate cloud listening acupuncture point's ability to detect any possible dangers ahead. However, this time, his caution was of no use. The Rangoon continent's allied army did not deploy any sneak attack tactic. They only waited in silence for the arrival of the gods. Among the four main gods, other than Shi Jie, the god of exploration, Russo, still had full combat power. Although the silver god Shan had lost his ability as a man, his strength had not weakened. As for the tyrant god Quangjuan, although he had woken up from his deep sleep, his mind was still not clear. His strength was also greatly reduced due to the loss of 2 acupuncture points. On the god's side, only Shi Jie and the hundreds of demigod experts had the upper hand. Shi Jie was like the emperor acupuncture point of the entire god's army. He was the strongest point. It was also because of his existence that the gods were still in a balanced situation with the Rangoon continent's allied army. After all, no one in the Rangoon continent's allied army was confident that they could defeat him. From afar, Shi Jie could already see the giant dragons in the sky as well as the Rangoon continent's allied army's neat phalanxes below. The number was obviously more than double the previous time. Their imposing manner was clearly well prepared. When the gods' army arrived at a distance of 1,500 feet from the Rangoon continent's allied army, Shi Jie ordered the gods to stop. The gods were arranged in an orderly manner. At the forefront were the demigod experts. The other 3 main gods led more than 10 god-level gods and floated in the air more than 100 feet away from the center of the gods' army. The gods were arranged in a pointed cone shape. The 1,500 feet distance was just the right distance for magic to weaken. Although magic at level 14 and above could attack from a very long distance, it would definitely weaken once it exceeded a certain distance controlled by a mage. This was one of the disadvantages of a large number of mages activating magic fusion. After the gods stopped, Shi Jie suddenly accelerated and flew towards the Rangoon continent's allied army alone. Nian Bing stood at the forefront of the Rangoon continent's allied army. When he saw Shi Jie flying towards him, he also floated up without showing any signs of weakness. Under his signal, only Feng Nu and Lan Chen followed him into the air. During the flight, both parties were very close to each other. When they were about 1,000 feet apart, they stopped almost at the same time. Nian Bing could see that Shi Jie had obviously recovered all of his combat power today. Although he did not activate his combat power, his body still emitted a layer of faint golden light. He was indeed the strongest god, as that invisible aura had already brought him quite a bit of pressure. He was sizing up Shi Jie, and Shi Jie was sizing him up at the same time. In Shi Jie's eyes, the tall and handsome Nian Bing, who was wearing a golden magic robe, looked even more upright as he floated in the air. The magic elements around his body were jumping with joy. The rich magic aura seemed to have caused the originally invisible magic elements to materialize. There were 7 types of magic elements surrounding his body, but they were neatly divided into 7 major parts, with the possibility of changing at any time. The gazes of the strong could easily cause energy resonance. Under the pressure of the other party, the radiance on Nian Bing and Shi Jie's bodies brightened. Shi Jie was like a suspended sun, shining with a dazzling golden light. The halo fluctuated from top to bottom. Shi Jie, who was wrapped in the golden light, looked almost invulnerable. Even his body seemed to be plated with a layer of gold foil. Whether it was his hair, clothes, or skin, they were all shining with a noble golden color. Under the pressure of Shi Jie, Nian Bing also underwent a change. Blue, red, green, yellow, silver, white, and gold colors surrounded his body and spread to a height of about 10 feet. The 7 colors were constantly changing positions, but none of them were mixed up and were exceptionally distinct. Although the volume of the 7 colors did not expand, the colors gradually deepened. The most peculiar thing was that Nian Bing's eyes had turned golden. In terms of aura, he was only slightly inferior to Shi Jie. "Can you represent the people of the Yangon mainland?" Shi Jie asked faintly. The allied forces of the Yangon mainland were not completely lucky to be able to withstand the first attack of the gods. Many things could be seen from this powerful young man in front of them. Although this young man did not kill many gods on the surface, the gods that were destroyed by his hands were all powerhouses among the gods. The deaths of the 2 overgods, Gu Long and Noah, the 2 overgods, Xia Yu and Kuang Jun, and the deaths of the god-ranked experts were all related to this young man in front of them. Nian Bing smiled and said, "Although I can't completely represent my army, overgod Shi Jie, you can say whatever you want. Seeing that you came here alone, it seems like you want to negotiate with us. However, from the casualties on both sides and the damage that we have caused to each other, it seems like we have nothing to talk about. Only when one side is completely destroyed can the hatred between us be resolved." Although there was a smile on his face, his eyes were filled with coldness. Regardless of whether it was the destruction of the lost continent civilization, the death of the dragon god, or the casualties of the allied forces of the 4 countries of the Yangon mainland at the hands of the gods, both sides had developed a deep-rooted hatred. Such deep hatred could not be resolved through negotiations. Shi Jie's expression remained calm, and he was not angered by the coldness in Nian Bing's tone. "You are right. Only when one side is destroyed can the problem be resolved. However, do you think that we will definitely be the ones to lose? Quantity is not the fundamental factor that determines the outcome of a war. If you think that the number of ordinary people is enough to threaten us, then you are underestimating us gods. War is inevitable. This time, I have a suggestion that is beneficial to both of us. In other words, I would like to change the format of this war." Nian Bing was stunned for a moment. He looked at Shi Jie and there were some changes in his heart. "Overgod, please speak. Do you have any good suggestions?" Shi Jie said, "After the first battle, both of us have suffered significant losses. However, I believe that you should be able to tell that the main force of the gods is still around. Therefore, our current strength is not weaker than yours. I'm sure you'll admit that." Nian Bing nodded and said, "That's right. Although your current numbers are less than half of what you had in the first battle, the majority of your strength is still there." Although the gods had suffered heavy casualties in the previous battle, most of them were the lowest-level divine servants. It was because of this that the current strength of both sides could be said to be balanced. Shi Jie continued, "If this war continues, no matter which side obtains the final victory, the final result will be a lose-lose situation. Out of the several 100,000 of you, I'm afraid that less than 1/10 of you will be able to return. Don't think that I'm just trying to scare you. If I don't care about my dignity as a god and invade your army, it will be impossible for you to stop me with my speed and attack power. Even if you use the same method to deal with my subordinates, the final result will be the same." Chapter 248. Nian Bing nodded. Shi Jie was right. Even if Nian Bing's abilities were on par with his, it would be very difficult to stop him if the other party deliberately wanted to do so. "Master Overlord, just say what you want to say. Perhaps your suggestion will pique our interest." Shi Jie stared at Nian Bing and said, "What I want to say is very simple. No one can predict the outcome of this war, but we can minimize the scale of the war. My suggestion is very simple. Both sides will send out their strongest experts, and the war will be reduced to a contest between a small number of people. No matter which side wins, the losing side will have to self-destruct unconditionally. Nian Bing's heart skipped a beat. She immediately understood what Shi Jie meant. She could not help but laugh coldly and said, "Lord Overgod, are you joking? Let's not talk about the strength of the experts on both sides. Just the credibility of your gods is enough to make me worried. So what if we defeat your experts? Will the gods under your command all commit suicide? Moreover, although the outcome of this war is unpredictable, I believe that Lord Shi Jie also understands that we are the ones who are more likely to win. Your suggestion seems to be too ridiculous." Shi Jie looked coldly at Nian Bing and said, "You don't believe me? I've said before that this is a good thing for both sides. If you win, you can exchange the lives of all the gods with the smallest price. If we win, then the Yangon mainland will be ours from now on. Using the smallest loss to determine the outcome of the war is not a bad thing for you. Do you want your army to be buried here? As for our credibility, I naturally have a way to prove it to you. Our continent of gods has 3 Lord True Gods. They once taught me a spell called the God's Curse. Make an oath in this spell. This is impossible to change. The spell will extract the essence of heaven and earth, and can be activated at any time. The God's Curse will act according to the oath made by both sides. If we lose in the end, then we don't have to commit suicide. The God's Curse can take away the lives of all the gods." After hearing Shi Jie's words, Nian Bing's heart trembled. He also knew about the Curse of God. This incantation really did exist. Back then, Cao and Tianxiang had explained the mysteries of this incantation to him in detail. This super curse could be said to have reached the standard of a 16th tier spell. After the spell was cast, the radius of the spell was as high as hundreds of square kilometers. Apart from the 4 true gods, no one could escape from this curse. At the same time, the conditions for using this curse were extremely harsh. It required a powerful living person as a blood sacrifice and a special method to succeed. Although Shi Jie was powerful enough, he was not a sorcerer and was not as powerful as a true god. It seemed impossible to cast this incantation. Nian Bing asked doubtfully, "Master Shi Jie, can you perform this incantation?" Shi Jie replied indifferently, "Why not? A long time ago, I completed this incantation with the help of a few true gods and sealed it in this god's blood curse stone." A faint red light lit up in front of Shi Jie. It was a dark red gemstone. The gemstone was very transparent. Although it did not emit any magical elements and did not flicker with any form of light, it had just appeared. Nian Bing immediately felt his magical power and mental strength stagnate. The strong pressure seemed to have frightened all the magical elements. Shi Jie continued, "Of course, I prepared this god's curse to enslave some important humans on the Yangon continent. Under my coercion, they only need to swear allegiance to me in the god's curse. They will forever be my subordinates, and even their descendants will carry on this curse. However, I can only use it here now. I'm not afraid to tell you my goal. I want to obtain the final victory with the least loss. However, I don't know whether the victory will belong to us. What this god's curse needs now is a strong enough blood sacrifice. This should be enough to prove my sincerity, right? In the face of the god's curse, there is no need for any credibility." Nian Bing nodded. "Then, according to Master Shi Jie's plan, how do we decide the battle between the strong and the oath?" Shi Jie had obviously thought of his plan. He replied indifferently, "It's very simple. You and I will each pick 5 people. 3 out of 5 matches. The loser will be destroyed by the god's curse." Nian Bing laughed. "Master Shi Jie's plan is really good. You have 4 overgods. 3 out of 5 matches. Do we have a chance of winning?" Shi Jie smiled indifferently and said, "This doesn't seem to be something a strong person should say. Don't you have confidence in yourselves?" Nian Bing shook her head and said, "This isn't a matter of confidence. Under the circumstances where we have a certain advantage, why should I take the risk and enter a battle of 3 out of 5 with you? How about this, Master Shi Jie? Let's decide the outcome of this battle between the two of us. Under the witness of the god's curse, we will not rest until one of us dies. Nian Bing's gaze was firm as she stared into Shi Jie's eyes. This time, it was Shi Jie's turn to be surprised. Are you saying that you want to fight me one-on-one? He could not believe his ears. Although this young man's aura was strong, it did not seem to be enough to contend with him. He did not understand why Nian Bing would make such a choice. Nian Bing said firmly, "That's right. It's a one-on-one battle between you and me. Of course, I have to remind you that I have my own mount and weapon. These should be counted as part of my personal strength." Although there was no change in Shi Jie's expression, he was constantly calculating in his heart. He knew that since Nian Bing dared to make such a suggestion, she naturally had her own confidence. Under such circumstances, he naturally had to be extra careful. After all, this battle was too important for the gods. Shi Jie had only made such a decision after careful consideration. Although he did not have absolute confidence that he could win against all the strong opponents, this was the only way to obtain the greatest benefits when they won. Shi Jie was gambling on the aspect that he had the most confidence in. Shi Jie's mind was racing. He thought about Nian Bing's performance in the first battle. At that time, he did not pay much attention to Nian Bing. In his eyes, Nian Bing's strongest combat power was naturally her spiritual power physical attack, as well as some assistance from magic. Now that he heard about weapons and mounts, he recalled that the sorcerer in front of him was also a dragon sorcerer. Furthermore, he seemed to have the strength to use a super artifact. If that was the case, perhaps his overall strength was not inferior to his own. However, did Shi Jie have any other choice now? He was also not confident that he could win 3 out of 5 battles. Although the overgods under him were not weak, Hegemon god Quangjuan had yet to recover from his serious injuries. Moreover, Silver was too cunning. Ever since he lost his ability as a man, their morale was at an all-time low. Similarly, the other party only had a few level 14 expert. It was difficult to predict the outcome. Although the god of exploration, Lu Suo, had a certain degree of confidence in winning, including himself, they only had 2 chances of winning. If the young and powerful sorcerer in front of him chose Lu Suo as his opponent, it would be difficult to win even if they won 3 out of 5 battles. Since that was the case, why not take control of the battle in his own hands? As the king of the overgods, how could he be afraid of a human youth? Thinking of this, Shi Jie's heart surged with pride. He nodded and said, "All right, then let the 2 of us decide the outcome of this battle." Nian Bing, Feng Nu and Lan Chen reminded her. They had witnessed Shi Jie's strength with their own eyes. How could they be willing to let Nian Bing take the risk? Nian Bing smiled and said, "It's all right. This might be the best way. If I can win, then our army won't suffer so many losses, right? Sir Shi Jie, please wait. We'll go back and discuss this. I think it's time for you to start preparing the curse of the god." Shi Jie nodded. After watching Nian Bing and the other 2 return, he flew back to the group of gods. He had already thought of who to use for the curse of the god's blood catalyst. Before returning to the Rangoon continent's allied army, Feng Nu said anxiously, "Nian Bing, how could you agree to his request? Haven't you seen Shi Jie's strength? He's a level 15 expert." Luo Ro and the others also focused their attention on Nian Bing. As they were too far away, they did not hear the conversation between Nian Bing and Shi Jie. Nian Bing glanced at Feng Nu and smiled. "Why? Don't you have confidence in your husband? Although Shi Jie is a level 15 expert, your husband is also a level 14 expert. In addition to the level 14 Emperor Kurobutsu, the other 6 Sword Souls, and Oscar, my overall strength may not be weaker than Shi Jie's. The curse of the gods is a very overbearing curse. If I can defeat Shi Jie, then the cost of this battle will be greatly reduced. Shi Jie is right. If he kills without regard for anything, even I won't be able to stop him. When that time comes, too many of our people will die. Without waiting for Luo Ro and the others to ask, Nian Bing explained Shi Jie's conditions in detail. After hearing Nian Bing's words, the leaders of the four-nation allied army fell into deep thought. Prince Rong looked a little older than he had in the first battle. He was not like Zaji, who did not have any energy in his body and could easily change his physique. With Prince Rong's magic cultivation and natural magic resistance, Nian Bing could only gradually restore his body and magic power. Nian Bing, isn't this decision of yours too bold? You must know that this concerns the lives of hundreds of thousands of our people. If you fight with Shi Jie, it will be equivalent to a huge gamble. Your gambling capital is hundreds of thousands of soldiers and all the human powerhouses, even the future of the entire Rangoon continent. Nian Bing naturally understood what Prince Rong meant. She smiled and said, "Grandfather, you should know that I'm not someone who is overconfident. Indeed, I don't have absolute confidence in defeating Shi Jie. However, is his god's curse really that powerful? The god's curse is indeed something that can't be violated by powerhouses below level 16. Once the curse is created, it will exert its power at the same time as the oath ends. However, Shi Jie is too confident in this curse. The god's curse is a special ability of the god of order, the god of time, and the god of destruction. As the opposition of the three true gods, the god of life and the god of death have their own ways to deal with it. I think that Shi Jie doesn't know about my relationship with the two true gods. He has the god's curse, but do you think I don't have a way to counteract it? Indeed, the price of gambling with hundreds of thousands of lives and the future of the Rangoon continent is too great. However, what if we don't have to pay anything for this gamble? Is it worth it?" Prince Rong was stunned. "Are you saying that you have a way to counteract the god's curse? However, Shi Jie is the king of gods. Is he so easily fooled?" Nian Bing smiled faintly and said, "Even though he's the king of gods, he's too confident in himself. He's also too confident in the curse of the gods. That's what I'm using. There's not much time now, so I can't explain too much to you. My battle with Shi Jie definitely won't be completed in a short period of time. While we're fighting, you guys can start making arrangements. If I win, naturally, all the problems will be solved. Under the effects of the god's curse, these gods will disappear forever. However, if I lose, you guys will immediately take action. I believe that even if there's a gap between Shi Jie and me, it's definitely very small. Even if he can defeat me, he'll have to pay a huge price. At that time, you guys will definitely be able to destroy him if you attack with all your might. The three remaining overgods among the gods are far inferior to us in terms of overall strength. Now, they can only rely on Shi Jie's tyrannical strength. My battle with Shi Jie is equivalent to being besieged by two 14th level experts, 6 13th level experts, and a giant dragon. As long as you guys are prepared to deal a heavy blow to the gods when I'm defeated, the victory of this battle will still belong to us. Since the other party will think that the god's curse will be effective against us, their defenses will definitely be weakened. After this attack, I believe that there will be no more suspense about victory." Naturally, Nian Bing would not agree to Shi Jie's request without considering it. Back then, when Kahl had mentioned the curse of the gods to him, he had purposely taught him a method to deal with this curse. He was afraid that Nian Bing would unknowingly be enslaved if he encountered any of the three true gods or faced this curse, just like what Shi Jie had said. Back then, the three true gods had assisted the gods to become powerful because of the god's curse. If it wasn't for the fact that Cao and Tianxiang were too big of a threat to them, perhaps the three true gods would have already used the god's curse to take action against this world. It was precisely because this was a huge gamble that didn't require any stakes that Nian Bing agreed to Shi Jie's request after careful consideration. Shi Jie was confident, but Nian Bing was also very confident in himself. After so many years of cultivation, he would use this battle to test his overall strength. Ever since he obtained 7 sword souls and the ability to use his spiritual power as a physical attack, He had never used his full strength to deal with someone. Therefore, even Nian Shui himself didn't know the extent of his overall strength. After listening to Nian Bing's explanation, the commanders representing the 4 empires no longer had any doubts about his decision. Naturally, it would be best if they won. Even if they lost, there was still a high chance of defeating their opponent. In their eyes, Shi Jie, the king of gods, was equivalent to sending himself into a dead end. At this moment, no one would say that Nian Bing's idea was despicable. Whether it was the Yangon Continent Alliance Army or the Lost Continent, the hatred between them and the gods could be said to be hatred between nations. Only by completely destroying the other party could they achieve true victory. Under such circumstances, so what if it was despicable? As the saying goes, a general stands on 10,000 bones. The final victory was the most important. However, the higher-ups of the 4-nation Alliance Army were still worried. They were worried about nothing else but Nian Bing's safety. They were very confident in Nian Bing. They also completely believed that even if Shi Jie won, he would be greatly injured. However, there was also a problem in front of them. If Shi Jie, who won, would be seriously injured, then what would happen to Nian Bing, who lost? Nian Bing felt the doubts in everyone's eyes. He raised his hand and placed it on his chest. He said, "Believe me. I can only tell you that even if the opponent is the king of gods, he wants to kill me. It's 100 times more difficult than defeating me. On the battlefield, there can't be any hesitation. Wait for my good news. I will do my best to win this battle." After saying this, Nian Bing walked to the side and whispered something in Yu Yu's ear. Yu Yu looked at him with a complicated gaze and nodded gently. Nian Bing smiled and said to the people around him, "Be prepared at all times. Who's on guard? Who's on alert?" There was no need to say anything more. He knew that Luo Ro would definitely arrange everything. Under the cover of the rainbow-colored radiance, Nian Bing floated up and returned to the vast sky. Shi Jie had also returned when Nian Bing returned to the sky. At the same time, another god rose into the sky with him. Xing Qing was second only to Shi Jie's hegemon god, Kuang Yun. Nian Bing glanced at Kuang Yun. Although Kuang Yun's gaze was filled with hatred, it was obvious that he was in a daze. His eyes were not lively enough and his face was very pale. It was obvious that he had not recovered from the blow he had suffered that day. However, Nian Bing was quite impressed with this hegemon god. He did not die under the special circumstances where he did not hesitate to sacrifice his life and used all his spiritual power to attack him. This hegemon god's strength was indeed praiseworthy. Unfortunately, he could only be a sacrifice today. Of course, Kuang Yun did not know his own fate. Otherwise, he would not have risen into the sky with Shi Jie. Shi Jie's gaze was very calm. Without the blood of a hegemon, how could he activate the god's curse? The 3 true gods had injected sufficient energy into the blood curse gem. However, if he were to activate a level 16 spell without the blood guide, just the backlash alone would be enough to take his life, let alone conserve his strength to fight Nian Bing. Therefore, he chose the weakest hegemon god, Kuang Yun. "Have you explained everything to Xi Qing?" Shi Jie looked at Nian Bing. At this moment, Nian Bing was looking at hegemon god Kuang Yun. In the concept of gods, there was indeed no such thing as feelings, be it family or friendship. At this moment, he could not help but feel a little sad for Kuang Yun. Of course, he did not think that Shi Jie brought Kuang Yun up to ambush him. Just like what Shi Jie said, if experts of their level were to escape, even experts of the same level would find it difficult to stop them. Moreover, that would not benefit the gods at all. "Yes, I have already prepared everything. Our Rangoon Continent's allied forces have agreed to turn this final battle into a decisive battle between the 2 of us. Just like how you have confidence in yourself, my friends have the same confidence in me." Shi Jie looked at Kuang Yun indifferently and said, "All right, let's start now." Before hegemon god Kuang Yun could understand the meaning of their simple conversation, Shi Jie's chanting had already started. It was indeed a strange thing to hear a warrior with a level 15 martial skill chanting an incantation. However, his chanting did not have the characteristics of a sorcerer. When a sorcerer chanted an incantation, they would need to use a special rhythm and intonation to trigger the resonance of the magical elements. However, Shi Jie's intonation did not change at all. He did not pause at all as he quickly completed his incantation as though he was reciting it. Endless divine power shall turn into endless sighs. Spirits of the wind, surround me and form a chaotic barrier. Spirits of the water, turn into gentle waves and condense into the mirror of time. Spirits of the earth, let go of the enmity between each other and release the shackles of the soul. Spirits of the fire, condense into a red lotus rope and weave a spatial net. For elements, lend the power of my heart and form an indescribable eternity. From the beginning of nothingness to the end of chaos, please stop all waves. Use the sigh of God as the source of the curse. Use the power of the elements as the essence of the curse. Let us form the ancestral curse pact, curse of the spear. When the incantation was completed, 4 rays of light appeared around Shi Jie's body at the same time. The green chaos was normal, the blue brilliance was like a water mirror, the yellow vortex was fluctuating, and the red flame condensed into a sacred fire lotus. The 4 rays of light were not dazzling, but when the snow blood cursed divine stone appeared, the 4 rays of light instantly surged into it. The golden rays of light around Shi Jie's body shone brightly. Tyrant god Wang Jun was shocked to discover that his body had suddenly solidified. That was clearly Shi Jie's power. At this critical moment of life and death, his consciousness suddenly became completely clear. However, he woke up a little too late. While his eyes were filled with endless resentment and unwillingness, Shi Jie's big hand patted his head. The tyrant god's tall and burly body was instantly covered by a bloody light. The golden brilliance was dazzling in the bloody light. This was what Shi Jie wanted. Not only was it his blood, but it was also the enormous energy that he had cultivated for thousands of years. The blood-cursed divine stone appeared and absorbed the bloody light formed by the tyrant god in an instant. The enormous bloody light filled the entire divine stone. Shi Jie, who swore before the curse of the gods, said indifferently, I, the king of god Wang Jun, am the tyrant god. I, Shi Jie, swear before the curse of the gods that if I lose the battle with the human representative of the Yangon continent, I will pay with all the lives of the god race. Seeing that Shi Jie was looking at him, Nian Bing did not hesitate and continued, I, the Icefire chef. I, Nian Bing, the ice and fire chef, swear before the curse of the gods that if I lose the battle with Shi Jie, I will pay with all the lives of the Yangon continent's allied army. Shi Jie nodded at Nianbing and said loudly, The curse of the gods, please be the witness of our vows, and use your blood-colored splendor to make the most just judgment. Just as he finished speaking, the bloody light emitted by the blood-cursed divine stone suddenly disappeared. Suddenly, the divine stone let out a crisp shattering sound and a ray of rainbow light that was only as thick as a finger soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, Homo disappeared. The blood-red light disappeared into the air, and the air seemed to have turned gloomy. 2 faintly discernible clouds floated above the clouds, and the magic elements in the air seemed to be covered with a layer of blood-red light. The deep energy brought a chill to the people who saw it. Shi Jie looked at Nianbing and Nianbing looked at him. They were the strongest people on both sides. They did not need to say anything and only needed to express themselves through actions. Shi Jie's body instantly exploded with an intense golden light. Nianbing could clearly see the other party's left hand and leg. Shi Jie's body was completely shrouded in a solid golden radiance. His powerful aura was not emitted. Instead, it was converged inward. There was no longer any pressure, but it still brought about terror. Nianbing was not idle either. The 7-colored brilliance was emitted in the shape of a flat surface. The 10 sword souls, led by Emperor Kurobutsu, squatted out. Gray light spots condensed under him. Amidst the loud dragon roar, the little dragon king Oscar's body that was slightly bigger than Yi Hao's body proudly supported Nian Bing. The gray scales on his body shone with a sparkling luster, and a faint layer of golden-gray airflow was emitted. Under the special situation where their souls were connected, Nian Bing communicated with Oscar through telepathy. The communication between a human and a dragon could be completed in an instant. In a sense, it could be said that Nian Bing was now controlling Oscar's body. Light and shadow surged and shone. Nian Bing's body suddenly flashed and brought Oscar along with her. On the other hand, the 7 sword souls were shining with different lusters. They instantly lined up in a row and raised their 7 divine swords at the same time. The sky's eye domain was like a huge light shield that descended from the sky with Shi Jie and the 7 sword souls as the center. Only in a face-to-face battle like this could one truly feel the power of the King of Lords. The intense golden light that was emitted from his body could not be weakened even by the sky's eye domain. A long golden saber appeared in Shi Jie's hands. His illusory figure floated up as he held the saber with both hands and slashed it diagonally towards the sky. That slash was untraceable, and the faint saber light brought about a shocking rainbow. Both parties who were watching the battle below found it strange that Shi Jie's saber was slashing towards the sky where there was nothing and not the 7 sword souls. An illusory feeling appeared on the 7 sword souls at the same time with 7 different light. Each of the sword souls brought about a long series of afterimages behind them. Shi Jie's body was instantly covered by these afterimages. In midair, Nian Bing and Oscar appeared along with a loud dragon roar. The place where they appeared was right in front of Shi Jie's attack. If one was not involved in the battle, it would be difficult to understand the current situation. Why would Nian Bing send herself to the sword light? Only Nian Bing knew her own difficulties. She did not expect Shi Jie's senses to be so sharp. He accurately grasped her and Oscar's position after they temporarily became invisible using their spatial magic. His slash looked like a sword light. However, when the sword light penetrated the blade, the aura and domineering aura on the sword had completely locked onto Nian Bing's body. Therefore, Nian Bing could only choose to take the attack head-on. A golden-gray lightning shot out from Oscar's mouth and struck the golden sword light. A thunderous roar instantly echoed in the sky. Golden light filled the air, and the golden sword light became much weaker. However, Oscar's breath did not stop him from continuing his attack. A layer of golden-gray light drifted out from Oscar's body. The speed of his flapping dragon wings was obviously slower. It was obvious that he was affected by the recoil. At that moment, a faint silver light drifted out from Nian Bing. The moment the golden sword light came into contact with the silver light, it changed its direction and slid into the distance. Nian Bing's continuous efforts finally allowed her to complete the interlaced fantasy realm without chanting an incantation. If there was any power in this world that could resist the attack of the Huangji acupoint, it would be the Tian Yin acupoint. Naturally, the Tian Yin acupoint's ability had to be displayed in a special form. The interlaced fantasy realm was such a special form. The surging energy burst forth like thunder, causing the sky to tremble. The 7 sword souls' attack method was very simple. Under the enhancement of the Tian Yin acupoint, their energy bodies had the advantage of speed. At that moment, they were not inferior to Shi Jie's ultimate spirit acupoint. This was also one of the advantages that Nian Bing relied on.